want to call the October meeting of the POA Board to order. I'd like to welcome all residents that have come to the meeting and those that are watching online. Just as a matter of protocol, if anybody speaks at all during the meeting, has questions, comments, or whatever, when called upon, please use the microphone so that people online can hear as well. With that, we'll get started. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the September meeting? It's been moved and second to approve the meetings of the September meeting. Is there any discussion? All in favor of accepting, raise your right hand. Approved 7-0. With that, we're going to move on to discussion about water and sewer rates from Mr. Brad Spiegel. Brad?
Thank you. Wanted to present to you the Finance Advisory Committee's recommendation for water and sewer rates as we proceed into the 2023 budget cycle. We did a very in-depth analysis of water and sewer consumption, taking that analysis literally to the household level, and got a very good profile of how we as residents and owners consume water and sewer activity across the village. This chart shows part of the challenge. If you've ever been in a manufacturing environment or a commercial environment, and you think about capacity planning. Literally in the winter months, we have about 12 million gallons of water going through our water meters, and in the summer months, it jumps up to nearly 45 million gallons. So an additional 25 to 30 million gallons per month, which causes some real challenges with our system, and hence we're trying to figure out how we take steps both to address what we're facing today as well as the future build-out activities. Just for a frame of reference, in this year's budget, water and sewer billings that we pay represent about $4.5 million of revenue coming into the POA. Next slide, please, Mitzi. So situation analysis, water rates and sewer rates have not changed in the last 2 years. LUB, which is our primary supplier of water, had contractual increases built in with the contract that was put in place a couple years ago. Since that contract went in place, we've had 3 increases, all contractually committed to, as they brought on additional capabilities and capacity to supply us more water and to address the pressure. TAS is our secondary water provider. They provide water for the Kahiti neighborhood and are also capable of flipping valves and supplying excess needs here in the main village. Even odd watering implementation has taken place with irrigation season. That has helped balance out how low we draw down the water tower, and it has improved some of that daily draw off, but it has not really changed the amount of water that we are consuming. We as a POA are trying to avoid installing larger water supply lines. If we have to go to a 16-inch main, we're looking at a capital outlay that would approach $10+ million. And it also will significantly increase our operating costs because in those months that we don't have huge water demand, we're flushing more and dumping more water to keep that water safe and healthy for us as homeowners. 72% of the households across the village use less than 5,000 gallons. It should say per month, not the entire year. Should say per month, excuse me for that. 93% of the households use less than 5,000 gallons during non-irrigation months. That 5,000 gallon figure will become important because we have tweaked on the sewer side of the equation, recognizing that 5,000 is kind of the right cutoff point for sewer charges, and that the rest of it is most likely going on our lawns as irrigation. 20% of the households use more than 15,000 gallons during irrigation season, and those 20% of households are consuming 43% of all the water across the community. There are 3% of the households out there that are using more than 30,000 gallons a month during irrigation season. So the FAC, after going through all this and working with Winston in particular, we believe that we need to put in a rate structure that both maintains the sales margin given rising input costs from both TAS and LUB, and I mentioned there have been multiple of those in the last 2 years. We believe the rate structure should be inverted so that we're encouraging conservation. We do not want to have to spend that $10+ million to put in bigger lines. There is some educational opportunity that we're going to be working with Chris and part of his team and their connections at UT Extension, really talking about how should you be irrigating your lawn and what are the true requirements and are there better grasses as we work through that process. And then we want to change the sewer cap, which presently is at 7,500 gallons before your sewer bill kicks out, down to 5,000 gallons, really looking at, 93% of the households out there are using less than 5,000 gallons in any given month. We are supportive of putting in the smart meter replacement. Couple of things. One, that does address low flow volume that is not being captured by the existing meters. It also creates a cost efficiency because those meters beam via cellular signal back to the office and don't require meter reading, if you will, to take place. And we also want to encourage people to sign up for auto pay, again, as cost management, so that they are not having to apply checks and cash and match accounts manually in the office. So that's kind of our recommendation. Let's get into the rates and how will this impact all of us. So on the left-hand side is the existing rate structure. The right-hand side is the proposed. If you're a user of 0 to 2,000 gallons a month, your rate would go from $22.03 for water to $23. We've then broadened out and added some categories. You'll see this gets to be a regressive structure where the more you use, the more you are going to pay. Sewer would go up from $26.46 on 2,000 gallons up to $28. And then the rate structure, as I mentioned, will cap at 5,000 gallons. Today, we pay 20% of our sewer bill into a maintenance fund that takes care of break-fix situations. That 20% would remain the same, but the figure actually drops down on the maintenance side because we have lower sewer bills with the cap moving from 7,500 gallons to 5,000 gallons. What this means to various people, you can kind of stare at this chart. If you're a 2,000 gallon a month user, a 5,000 gallon a month user, 15,000 gallon a month user, and so on. If you're in the normal usage area, you would see your monthly bill go up in the 5 to 7% neighborhood. If you are a very big user, in the case of we have people who are dumping 60,000 gallons of water on their lawns, you would see your bill climb from $345 to $665, so a very big increase. The intent is not to rip people off. The intent is to change behavior with that sort of a rate change system. So that's, if you will, the recommendation the committee is making. We have put in this slide we went and spot checked how were we in Tellico Village vis-a-vis Loudon and Maryville and then across Knox County. Very much in line at the 2,000 to 5,000 rate, which is where most everybody sits. When you start pumping lots of water onto your lawns north of 15,000, you'll see we are still the most competitive, even for those large usage numbers as you look at Loudon, Maryville, and Knox County. So the recommendation the FAC would make would be to put the rate structure that we have discussed and build in for budgeting purposes into effect for the 2023 start January 1.
Okay. Do we need a motion on that, or is that?
It'll be approved as part of the budget process.
Okay. Thanks, Brad.
Yes.
Any questions?
Any questions from the board?
No, I'm good.
Any questions from residents?
Yep, there it
I think it's on top.
Yeah,
It's
no,
on.
I talked to
It's
him a few times.
It's already on? Okay. My question is, we have between construction that's already underway and those for which are permits, approximately 550 homes. That's about 1,100 more people. My question is, at what point do we need to draw a line? How much can we continue to support at the rate that we're going? Do we have any answers for that, or is this, yes, sir?
So we've discussed this over the last few years, and I've never gotten an answer for this question, and I'm asking it to you. Beth, we own how many lots?
159
POA owns 150 plus lots. How many lots are out there without homes on them?
around
1,600 lots are owned by somebody else. How do I, as a director on this POA, go to that property owner that owns that property, paying an assessment, wants to build a house, and tell them, you can't build a house? That's the only way to control it.
Well, my answer to that is, we need to know at what point we can't build anymore. At what point we don't have the capacity to be able to support amenities. We don't have the capacity to be able to provide sewer and water.
Well, we've had those studies done by various engineering firms over the last 5 years, and every one of them comes back and says that we do have the capacity. We do have issues that we need to address. One of them, the most significant, is this alternate watering days. One of the ones that's coming up real soon is that Loudoun County has been having some issues with rainwater intrusion into their system, as we have here during very heavy rainfalls. And when they shut their system off, we can't feed into theirs, so we're proposing a holding tank here that we're about to vote on in the next budget or real soon. But it's still, we can't, and this is, I'm not being adversarial here, I'm wanting to know from the property owner's question, how do you go to a property owner and say, you can't build your house here?
It may become necessary.
No, sir, it will never become necessary because you will lose that lawsuit. You're telling a person you cannot build on what you
That would be
own.
eminent domain.
You can't do it. The only way we can do it is to say, we're willing as a property owner association to take the lots that we own, lay them aside, never get an assessment, and pay property taxes on them in perpetuity. That's what we would be willing as property
Yeah.
owners to do.
Well, the
So-
other thing is, on the lots that we don't own, if we were to tell somebody they can't build, that's called a taking of property. And you can do that by eminent domain, but I would tell you, eminent domain is not a very popular thing here in Tennessee.
I'm sure it's not,
Yep.
sir, it's not a popular any place I've ever lived.
But the gist of it is that every study that we've done tells us that we're good through build-out.
On every single lot that's available.
Yes.
And by the way, that would include the new lots we've just picked up from Cooper.
Yes.
You know.
And you saw from the chart that Brad showed that the issues are in the summer when we're talking about irrigation. And specifically, they were Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, which we're hoping to level out.
Now we balanced.
Will level out by the even and odd thing. So it's going to take cooperation from residents as well as all of us to look at how are we conserving water, but the system can handle it.
I still have my doubts, but thank you.
Well, those aren't really our opinions anyway. Those are the opinions of the engineers that have done the study. Another question, please?
What about the water intrusion issues that we're having? How can that be more closely identified and prevented or addressed?
So I can start with that
He's
answer.
right there.
Actually, we should have the expert answer it. Wait, yes.
We have identified a huge problem with tanks that were put in the past, they're several years old, with settling around the 4-inch going into the tank, and that is something that we're addressing on those tanks that we continue to get called out on, that during storms that we're having problems with where alarms go out. So we're slowly addressing those as we can. But if you look at the numbers of our water loss and you look at what we're going to capture with these new meters, it's showing us, just from what we've done in Kahiti, we've got a lot of water running through your home. So when you've got that commode sitting there running and flushing all day long, and y'all know what I'm talking about when you have one that runs. So all that water is going into our septic system. So I don't believe when we get this meter change-out program completed, I don't think our I is going to be as big as we thought it was. I think part of it, I think where we got a 25% water loss right now, I think we're going to cut that water loss to about 13% water loss, 13 or 14%. So that means we've got a huge number of water just running into our sewer system from where commodes and sinks and stuff like that are running. But, so I think that'll address our I&I. Plus the fix that we've got on the new installation, we won't have that I&I problem because we've addressed it on the new installation. So now we're slowly going back as we got time going back and fixing the old ones.
So during heavy rain events, I mean, that's usually when we experience this type of problem.
Yes, sir.
Are we doing anything with existing homes, or what are we looking at in the existing system as it stands today to try to reduce that?
Those that the alarms are going off during
Yes.
those times, we're keeping those documented, and we're going back and fixing that problem. There was an old rubber grommet that went between the inlet, the 4-inch inlet into the tank, and when the tank or the pipe settled, it was creating a gap in there, and any kind of surface water is getting in there is going directly in there. So we've got a fix to where you can go inside the tank and outside the tank. It bolts together where it cannot move, and that's taking care of it once we put a new line in there. So,
Clayton,
yes, sir.
at one point, I thought you thought there was rainwater coming from the house through the gutters, through the downspouts, straight into the tank.
There has been some of those, but with our new inspectors, when we got those new inspectors a couple of years ago, that was one of their charges, is make sure during landscaping, during all that process of building a new house, to make sure there's none of that running into the tanks.
I'm talking about existing houses.
Yes, and when we find those, we make sure they are removed from
And
those.
how do you find them?
Well, when you go to a tank and you got one that's overflowing or you got an alarm going off, and you're sitting there and you're watching, you can hear the water running in those. You can hear the water running in. So then you start digging up to address the fix that we know has been the problem on a lot of them. Well, if that's not a problem, then you start talking to homeowners, you start looking for gutter drains. There's been places we went out and stuck a water hose down in a gutter drain on a home, you know, and got the lid off the tank, and you can hear the water running into the tank.
So how many of those have you found?
And, you know, probably 10, 15.
And you have no idea how many more you might have out there?
Correct. But we're continually looking at those as we have those sewer calls on those.
Does that answer your question, Rick? Then come to the mic and ask,
I guess the point is that you don't know how many are out there. There's no active program to identify where those are, and we're still getting this intrusion, which we're all paying a price for. So how can we prevent the intrusion, period? You're telling me that if we're at 25% now, then, I'm sorry? Water loss. Water loss. Then if we don't go down below 15%, what are you gonna do?
As before, there was 2 different programs that Jeff Gagley before me done to address these. I'm not one that can just throw money at something. We're investigating continually on these that we're having alarms, and we will find a fix to those. We identify, I can tell you every house that we have alarms go off during the storm. And we go back to those every time we get an opportunity, and we investigate to find out where the water's coming in. We have found that the majority of those has been that 4-inch where the water's going in, the sewer's going into the tank. So we think when we get through all those, it's gonna take care of the majority. Now, when you go to Kahiti, we've identified 52 places in Kahiti that people has created a bowl around their sewer tank, you know, and they've funneled all the water right into their sewer tank. So in around it, so there's issues like that we have to fix. There's grading and stuff like that, and that's something when we're installing a tank beside one, we're addressing it on the other one. So we're constantly working at this. You know, is it something that we can go in and spend a fortune on doing automatically? You know, we're wanting to get this tank put in to where we can handle this I&I problem, and it'll give us time to address it. But there's no, I mean, we can hire a company to come in and dig all these tanks up and investigate them, but there's no telling what that's gonna cost. So,
And just to summarize what I thought I heard you say about the new meters, they're more accurate.
yes, sir.
They'll be able to pick up low flow.
Yes, sir.
Which we currently aren't measuring because our meters don't measure low flow.
Correct.
So therefore, if you're looking at a 25% water loss, when you get accurate readings, that says the property owners will pay more for water because you'll measure low flow.
Absolutely.
Which reduces your water loss.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Clayton, just a clarification on your last comment. Would it be cost effective to, you said, we know that the old systems cause this problem. We go after them when they fail. Would it be cost effective to put together like a kind of a preventive thing and go out ahead of time and start fixing those? Or is that a major dig up to fix that, or is that fairly simple?
It is a major dig up because you've got to dig up your 4-inch coming from the house going into the tank.
Okay.
You got to remove that 4-inch. You got to go in and put this new seal on the inside and outside. Then you got to reinstall the 4-inch. So it is a pretty big deal.
Okay, so it's more than just coming out, popping the lid, maybe half-hour labor, boom, you're done.
Yeah, because you're digging up people's lawns and you
Okay.
got to fix those back and stuff.
Brad, you mentioned that roughly 23% of our households are, you know, the major users of our water. Is there any way that you can identify those individual households and do any kind of an education program? Or are you just going to let the price in the market drive different behavior? Which?
Yeah, we certainly can tell from the data which individual households are being billed. We specifically in this did not, I'm going to say, shame and defame anybody, so, but yes, we as an organization do know who those households are, and it's based upon their monthly consumption during the irrigation season where the challenge is.
And so you're
So
going to...
we can certainly, you know, do that. As I say, the structure that's put in place is specifically to change behavior. We want to lower those spikes, and in lowering the spikes, we'll be able to have a longer run of the system, first of all, and then secondly, you know, also, if you get to a point where we're not hitting the peak rate structures that we see in some of the coastal water side.
So you're not going to alert these homes beforehand, you're just going to let...
We're going to share the rate structure with them, and then, as I said, there's an education process that we're encouraging as well, where, you know, there really is truly no reason to put 40,000 gallons of water a month on your lawn.
I agree.
And so sharing that with the people and doing that through an education process is the counter to just the price going up.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Harry Rooker, my name. I have a question for you. The homeowner is responsible for maintenance of the pipe from the house to the tank. And the POA is responsible for maintenance from the tank onward. Who's responsible for that grommet?
We figure we are because that is part of the tank. So. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is the reserve study.
Okay. Again, representing the Finance Advisory Committee, a year ago, we launched into a process to do a formal reserve study, going out and hiring a firm that specializes in doing this. We'll just talk a little bit about why we thought the reserve study was necessary. When you think about common area asset management, we really think about it in three different buckets. And as an organization, we have sort of managed the world in two buckets, an operating and a capital side of the equation. Going forward, we think there are some best practice recommendations to really think about three buckets, and those three buckets really are, one, considering the purchase and the building of new amenities. So I'll use the PicklePlex as an example of that. The PicklePlex comes along. How do we raise the funds to build that kind of a thing? We then construct it. Once that then enters into the asset of the organization, there's regular repair and maintenance. So that's taking care of cracks, changing light bulbs, painting, running the electricity for the fans, so on and so forth. Those would be things in the operating budget. And then there's a major repair and replacement of existing assets, which is really the key focus that the reserve study talked about. And it's what assets were owned by us that we need to maintain over its useful life. So why this is important is, first of all, we wanted an alignment of the board's fiduciary responsibilities with us as property owners' common interest. Things to think about are, how does that impact our property values? One of the things that brought all of us to Tellico Village were the beautiful amenities and the opportunity to have all of those at our use and discretion. There's a responsibility to maximize owner enjoyment and the benefit. Because we own utilities like water and sewer and roads, there's a mandatory fulfillment of service levels that we all expect and anticipate. When we turn on the tap, we want the water to be there at good pressure. When we flush our commodes, we want it to go someplace. And so all those really need to be there. As we think about how do you fund all these kinds of things that we have across the organization, one of the things that is cognizant in everybody's mind is we want to minimize special assessments and we want to minimize the use of debt out there. So we'd like to be able to make sure we have the money to pay for things as we progress along. To the extent that we're going to hold reserves, we want to make sure we have a strong investment policy that's prudent. None of us want to go invest in crypto or anything like that on our reserve monies, but we need a good investment policy in place. We want to be compliant with accounting standards. And then also really think about something that we have not traditionally done, which is to have a separate pool of money for new amenities coming along. So when you hear about, let's go build bocce ball courts or things like that, those would not be things that would traditionally be covered in what we're talking about in the context of reserves. So next slide, please. So reserve study really, it's a relatively simple concept, but you break all of the assets that we own into its various components. So at the highest level, we talk about a water system, a sewer system, our roads, our buildings, our golf courses, our marinas, so on and so forth. And then they drill down in several more levels. So in the context, I'll just use golf courses as an example. In golf courses, they broke down clubhouses and tee boxes and fairways and greens and bunkers and cart paths and equipment that it takes to maintain the golf courses. All those levels of detail went into the reserve study. They then look at those lower level items and they say, what is the useful life of an item like that? On something like a mower, it may be 7 years. So every 7 years, you got to think about buying it. In the case of golf greens, it may be a much longer period because you're doing constant maintenance to us. But they think, what's the useful life of that typical kind of an asset? You then calculate the remaining useful life. So if you had something with a 30-year life, you've had it in service for 20 years, you would have 10 years remaining useful life on a 30-year asset. So what that's going to say is in the model that they build, 10 years from today, they will say, you need to buy that asset again in the future at that point in time. We're calculating both the current cost of replacement, and I'll spend a second on that in the next slide, Then we use the future cost of replacement, so there's today's replacement cost. We're going to do it in 10 years, so you inflate today's cost up 10 years out in the future. You make some assumptions around the inflation rate. This study used 4%. There are assumptions around return on investment. There was a nominal return on investment, which means the after inflation rate of 0.75%. And then they build a 30-year cash model that talks about reserve balances, contributions, expenditures out of those, what inflation impact was, and how much interest we would have earned on our reserves. So big mathematical calculation. The caveat is it's a mathematical calculation. So when you see some of that, there will be lumps in the various years that we, using discretion, will say, okay, the model says its useful life is 30 years. We may be able, through good maintenance and practice, to extend that longer life. There may be things like Tenacity is a good example. It burned down. Well, what we had in there comes out of the reserve study, and then we're going to replace it with insurance money. And then part of the question gets to be, how much expansion do we do? Are there things differently? Does it cost more? And as you think about those, all those will get factored in, and we'll update the model. The beauty of using the firm that we used is we have their software and all their licenses, so we have the capability in-house to maintain this, to change assumptions, and to run various scenarios, so we can use that as we guide our judgment through the process. Next slide, please, Mitzi. Just can't read it, but suffice it to say, when you look like at the yacht club as an example, there were 40-some pages of detail building up the yacht club that covered every surface, every carpet, every shingle, every window. You see in the blue and the green on the right, every window size was figured out, and they use that in a very calculated basis to build up each of the individual properties and to look what's out there. And we did this for every one of the assets that are out there. There are 3D models of all the buildings, so we've got a good foundation that's isn't somebody going, yeah, I think it's $431 a square foot times however many square feet. That's not the way they did this thing. So quite impressive how they built it up. Now,
Well, just to add to that, I mean, that is going to be very useful in the case of Tenacity.
right. So Tenacity, they built the same kind of model, so that's available, that we have all that detail when we're working with the insurance company. And so it'd be a good asset and resource for us to have all that information.
So Brad, it would specifically break out roof as part of the building,
Roof is broken out as
which
part of
would
the
have a
building?
separate useful life than, let's say, the HVAC system.
Correct.
So therefore, from a reserve basis, it times, based upon useful life and remaining life, when things would have to be replenished.
Each of the subcomponents within a asset level, yes. And then as you think of all the buildings we own, they would all get phased. So Toqua, as an example, being a new building, it's going to kick way down the road when you would need to go replace Toqua versus an asset that was put in place in the 80s. So the big aha is kind of what's shocking. When we got this whole process done, if we started today with Tellico Village being an uninhabited piece of property, and we said, let's go build at today's costs what we have and own as an association, we'd be looking at a bill of over $400 million, including land and fairways. Fairways are something, and we spent time talking with Chris, and we decided that we would really never do a full fairway replacement because you maintain those. However, other elements of the golf course, you know, we've all done bunkers recently the last few years. Greens get redone, tee boxes get redone. You would go do those things. So we backed out fairways and we backed out the land that we own, and we're still sitting right about $360 million of items that we should be thinking about having reserves for that fell within the premise of this study. So you think about $360 million, you think about how many homeowners and lot owners there are. Every one of us, per lot that we own or per home that we own, has about $60,000 worth of an asset associated with what we have. As we stare at that $360 million, 2/3 of that is in our water and sewer system. And when you add in roads to that, we go to a full 82% of that $360 million, make up that 110 miles of water, sewer, and roads, and all the connections that we have to our homes for those assets. So unfortunately, it's what a lot of us never think about. We just anticipate we'll turn the tap and that water will flow, and when we flush the toilet, the you know what will go where. And you know, those are things that are traditionally in the context of a city or a county rather than being something that we own as individuals. So you see the breakdown there at the bottom. Buildings, 30-some million dollars worth of buildings at replacement cost, 21 million on our 3 courses, plus the fairways that would get added back. The fairways were about 28 million, so it was a big number for fairways to go in there. Boat docks, 6 million, the rolling stock that we have across equipment and vehicles, the rec center, and then our dock system gets to be a very large number. So next slide, please. So, I'm sorry, go back one more. I forgot my punchline here. So the Facility Advisors International says, okay, how much should you be setting aside a year to take care of your $360 million of assets? And their recommendation for the next few years, and then it gets bigger because of inflation, is that we should be putting into our savings accounts, aka our reserves, $8 to $10 million a year, so that we have the money when it's time to do major repair and replacement on the assets we have. So next slide, please. So I personally went, what? And did the, kind of big struggle, and I said, okay, let's just do simple math. If $360 million is the magic number on assets out there, if all those assets had a 50-year useful life, how much would I have to set aside every year to build that up over 50 years? That's $7 million. If all those assets had a 40-year life, it's $9 million. If all of them had a 30-year life, it's $12 million. So to Steve's point, we obviously have lots of different useful lives because of how the components build up in there, but it's really starting to draw a circle for us around, given the number is that big, it's $60,000 that every one of us owns, but then unfortunately also has a responsibility to maintain. Those are big numbers for us as we think about it. So next slide, please. So there's no magic solution. We as a committee sat down and we brainstormed a bunch of different ideas and kind of put it in the context of, there's a lot of different knobs to turn. And so we're working with the board now during the budget process and with the management team to say, what are the right levels of knobs that we can turn? Should there be a percentage of our assessments that go directly to the reserve fund? Should we have a policy that excess operating cash over a given amount goes directly to the reserve funds? Should we do something with our water and sewer bills to think about contribution? Should we do something when property transfers to have the next owners buy into part of that $60,000 that's out there? What can we do in government grants? And Mitzi's pursuing some of those things to help build up funding so that we don't have to pay for that out of our own pocket. There's the opportunity to use debt, special assessments, which nobody wants to do, obviously, are up there. Productivity on our cost structure, and then, what should we do with user fees so that we can balance those out? Traditionally, we've been a community, about half of our revenue comes in from the assessment side, and about half of our revenue comes in from user fees of playing golf and docking our boats and eating in our restaurants and using the rec center, so on and so forth. So lots of ideas out there, and I think L's probably the most important. There's a lot of other ideas too. How do we start to think about what else is out there that helps us get in this perspective? And the analogy I shared the other day when we were walking through this is, it's a bit like me talking to my daughter right after she graduated from college and got her first job, and we sit down, we say, okay, what kind of medical insurance do you need? What kind of life insurance do you need? And what are we going to start doing for your pension? And how do we start thinking about your 401k? And how do you maximize your match? The most important thing is to start. And I'll promise you, a 22-year-old with a new puppy has no desire to put money in her pension, but she is. So, you know, it's really important that we think about it and say, okay, how do we start that process so that we're working in this direction? For the 23 budget, as I mentioned, you know, lots of different strategies are being reviewed right now. We're going through the process of rolling up all the revenue and the cost structures as we look at them. We'll be back at it again next week and the week after, and then we are going to do a public session on the 4th of November, rolling out and looking at the budget. But lots of work to do to think, how do we adjust those knobs that I talked about in the last slide? And then I think just important for all of us to focus on is something we've traditionally not had, is in addition to taking care of what we have, to the extent we want more things, how do we start to build provisions to do those? So the PicklePlex was on the outside looking in. It'll now roll into the reserve study since we have the asset once it launches in a month or a couple weeks here. Tenacity, when it gets replaced, if we build back exactly what we had and use insurance money, it's not a big tweak. It does have a new useful life, though, because it's going to be brand new and longer, but to the extent we build it back bigger or differently but more expensive, we got to figure out how you pay for those. And then, you know, things like came out in the survey about, you know, more parks, more paths, more recreation, those kinds of things are, again, on the outside looking in. So all these considerations are being reviewed between the FAC and the board. We wanted to share where we are with you right now, and as some decisions are taken, those will obviously be shared with the community as well. So.
Okay, thanks, Brad. Maybe as perspective, Steve, I don't want to put you on the spot, but can you kind of tell us where we're at with our reserves today, and kind of how that's been built up over the past 2-3 years?
I think Jessica will be able to correct me. I think we got about 14 million in reserves at the end of September. About 2 million, a little over 2 million is sitting in water and sewer. Based upon this analysis, which opened my eyes as to the size, because if you remember several years ago, the way we got for a target of 9 million was we took the last page, which is informational only from the audited statements, and we said, well, let's assume that we got to have a 30% funded rate, and they're half used up. That calculation came out to 9 million. What this shows is that 9 million is woefully understated. So the good news is we finally have a detailed reserve analysis and valuation. I say it's bad news because sometimes you don't want to ask the question if you don't want to know the answer. If you want to know the answer, what do you say? If you don't want to know the answer, don't ask the question. Well, we asked the question. So now the board has got a fiduciary responsibility based upon this to assess this data, see how it fits in the plan. And like you said, you got to get started. So our 14 million, it's great. We've got 14 million in reserves. Yep. It's a great start. Is it where it needs to be? In my opinion, it's not even close. So the other thing I want to say is I want to truly thank you and the FAC team, because this was all done, folks, during this year when we did not have a CFO. The FAC worked with our contractor, worked with Winston and our operating managers, and worked through the data and pulled this all together as a volunteer advisory committee. We did have a consultant that had the model, which we now have, that we can use. But Brad, I want to thank you personally for all the effort you did in this, and outstanding job. Now it's on to the board once we get this finalized to decide, and we work with Chet and company and Mickey, our new CFO, to see how do we work this through and what's the game plan. I call it the glide path. What is the bogey you got to get to? You know you're at 14. Do you got to be at 30? I don't know what the bogey is yet. We know it's bigger. And how do you get there?
Yep.
And how does that come out of assessments? Because as you know, we've never had a special assessment. We want to stay away from special assessments. So how do you work that into the equation? But outstanding work. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Brad. Any other questions, comments from the board? Anybody, the residents? We have one here, Fred.
Yeah, just a question. I'm sure it's something you guys have done or are thinking about. But we can't be the Lone Ranger. We can't be the Lone Ranger here. I mean, there must be a lot of other communities that are in similar situations. How have they dealt with it? Are you looking into that? Good.
That's
Repeat
great.
the question.
Yeah, great question. The question was, we can't be the only community facing this, and you're absolutely right. Oftentimes, to Steve's point, people don't ask the question because they don't want to know. And, you know, you get the most dramatic situations, something like we all heard about in the news where that Surfside condo came down. Their board had a recommendation made to invest $5 million in that particular building to secure it. Of course, they didn't, and they had, you know, quite a catastrophic situation, but I believe it's now north of $1 billion. The settlements are flying all over the place, and the lawyers are taking a lot of money because people didn't address those issues. But
There must be some communities that have.
and some communities have. One of the beauties of Tellico Village is we have a really broad breadth. So when you think of, you know, north of 6,000 assessed lots and people paying, we've got a lot of people involved in the situation. So that puts us in a good context. I think when you look at a condo situation where they're a lot smaller, much more difficult to deal with a body blow. If you think about something, you know, horrific happening, and you had to do something like a special assessment to catch up, I think it's good frame of reference. If each of us had to pay a $1,000 special assessment, we'd raise north of $6 million instantly. Now, nobody wants to do that, but, you know, it does give us a lot of power and strength in numbers as we think about what happens. But I think, again, the most important thing that we're sharing as a recommendation is we should start in, exactly to Steve's point, get on a glide path. And we know we need to save more than we've been saving, and there'll be the right process to build towards that direction.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brad.
Safe travels, Brad.
Thank you.
Yeah.
She's in the lobby.
Next up is, Mitzi is sitting in for Chet. Chet had not an emergency, but he had something that he had to attend to, a personal nature. So Mitzi is filling in for him today.
Sure. And I don't recall if we've introduced our new CFO, so I want to do that before I go into the admin part of this report. But Mickey White is standing behind me. He looks very tired because we've kept him here long hours his very first week working on budgets. So Mickey will come to you all shortly, I think, and sit with Jessica during the financial report, but we're tickled to death to have him. So welcome, Mickey. Thank you so much. I'll dive right into this. As Marty said, Chet had a different appointment to be at, so I'll go ahead and give this report. The TVPOA had a net income of $294,000 for September, which is $86,000 under the budgeted $380,000. Now, Jessica Johnson will give you all full details shortly on the actual report, the financial report, so I'm just doing a quick high level. Our total revenue exceeded budget by $170,000, and the expenses were actually higher than budget, $253,000. Moving on into IT, we have begun the online election ballot setup and configuration with e-ballot. I look to Beth to say, is that communication with the candidates and the biographies going out this week or next week? Next week. Okay, so they all already are online. Tomorrow night is candidates night as well, so, you know, be prepared for that. We do have two current board members who are re-upping and two new people who are running, and that is Marty Inkrot, Steve Snyder, John Orr, and Donald Hart. So those four candidates are running for the board election. Currently, AT&T fiber circuit to the Tanassi Snack Shack has been installed and tested. We have a full gig to the shack now. The security cameras have been added to the new PicklePlex. Did get a new email from Kevin Alphon, our IT manager, earlier today. The WATE weather camera that is on top of that snack shack is going to be great for viewing of the progress of any new construction of the Tenacity building when that takes place. So that's just going to be kind of a bird's eye view for everybody if you're at home and just want to see what progress has been made. All replacement equipment that was lost in the Tenacity fire has been ordered and sitting in a stockroom awaiting the temporary trailer set up by Clayton, and we'll talk about that shortly. Moving on to HR, in the month of September, we filled 3 part-time positions, 2 seasonal positions, and 1 full-time position for a total of 6 new hires. Currently, we have 3 openings. 2 of those are part-time in recreation, and 1 of those are in maintenance. And so Russell and Chris do have candidates for those positions, and they are interviewing. Marketing in 2022, September only, discovery request of 128 versus last year in 2021, she had 97. Year-to-date numbers, POA lots closed, 147 this year, 2022, versus 207 in 2021. The third quarter newsletter is in the works. Beth did give us that update. And then we have 1 unit available in Village Square. Food service, the restaurant sales continue to remain strong. Lunch at the Yacht Club has been successful, and we do plan to continue that for as long as it warrants throughout the winter. I will say, with the caveat, we lost 2 employees yesterday to other positions elsewhere. So if you think that the 3 servers we have downstairs right now are familiar, it's because they are familiar and they work 7 days a week. So be kind to those folks as we are interviewing and trying to get those replaced. Just to give you an example of some of the exit interviews as to why they would leave, the atmosphere is different than Tenacity. It's much more formal here in the Yacht Club. We've had complaints that it's too much walking. They weren't used to that much walking from the execution of the kitchen to the other side of the dining room, and it's just a preference. It's not that there was anything necessarily wrong. They just don't want to work at the Yacht Club. Looking at some numbers, I know y'all are interested in that. Toqua Clubhouse sales for September was $133,000. Year to date, that puts us at $1.05 million. So September 2021 was $840,000. So in 2022, we are $217,000 better than where we were year to date 2021. 20% of that, 20% of that was an increase since the fire at Tenacity. Yacht Club total food and beverage sales for September only, $206,000. So our sales are at $1.19 million. For September year to date, we're at 1.4. And just as another little tidbit, 37,000 of that total for September was lunch sales only. So we're averaging about 96 people a day for lunch here, which is about half of what we were doing at Tenacity. I know people are interested in seeing how much of these sales came from the lunch crowd. The Kahidi Clubhouse sales for September was $62,000, and year-to-date, $457,000. So looking at that against last year's September 2021 year-to-date, we were at $371,000. So this year for 2022, Kahidi is $86,000 better in revenues. Good job, Bob Brunetti.
Mitzi,
Yes. Yes, sir.
so it's not confusing the property owners.
Okay.
When you say our revenues at Toqua and our revenues at Yacht Club, strictly, those are not the POA's revenues.
Correct. Those are AWE.
Those are AWE's revenues at those restaurants. The only revenues that are our revenues are from Kahidi.
Yes, sir.
Just to be clear.
Thank you for clarifying that, yes. Real quick, we're working on the 2-year food plan at Tenacity. Our Tenacity Restoration Committee will be reviewing 2 food truck options this Friday in our Tenacity Restoration Committee meeting. So there will be more information coming out on that later on. Now moving on into ACC and codes. For September, we permitted 15 single-family homes. Year-to-date, we have permitted 238 single-family homes. In comparison to last year, this time it was 288. 39 miscellaneous permits for September. We currently have 317 homes under construction, 2 of which are multifamily. Looking at sewer tanks installed for the month of September, we had 27. So year-to-date, 262 versus last year of 187. Sewer leaks this year, we've had 29, the month of September, 29. Year-to-date, 269 versus last year of 246. So we've had more sewer leaks this year than we did last year. But on the flip side, water leaks, we've had less this year. Water leaks this year, we've had 121, and last year it was 167. Water meter changeout program, I know a lot of you are interested in that. We have made the statement that in 1 week alone, they changed out 100 new meters in Kahidi. So I got with the guys and asked, well, how many does that put us up total? We are around the 200 mark on the total change out, and that number does include these new builds that are coming in. So as new homes are being built, they are using these new meters. And Karen's got some photos up, good. We'll move right on into building maintenance. PicklePlex lights are wired and working, and this is just a photo of that so that you all can see what that looks like. They have put the water line in, slip signs for the new docks at Kahidi. Landscaping, we'll move on to that. Planting of fall annuals. You'll notice this throughout the village, not only from our landscaping team, throughout Public Works, but also our golf maintenance team. I stopped at Tokwa yesterday and noticed that the golf maintenance guys were putting these fall annuals out there. And that's just a nice refresher to have as it's getting winter and dreary months, as I like to call them. Still on Public Works, we're working on the Tenasseee Clubhouse site prep. Clayton's team is working on the Tenasseee temporary building permit, engineering, and the utilities. The work is going to begin, let me say this real quick and then I'll go back to this. We are also working on the Chota Road repair work. The work begins October 24th. You have seen the directional signs that are located on 444. I'll ask Clayton to come up at this time. I know that they have been asked about the safety and the direction and the traffic flow during the time that we're going to work on this Chota Road repair. So Clayton, if you'll give us a little bit of insights as to what you all are doing and what you see that project looking like for our property owners.
Yeah, the remainder of this week, you'll see a bunch of detour signs going in place. We reached out to TDOT about putting in a temporary light at the end of Chota Road. A lot of people had asked us if we could do that. I've talked to Todd Sexton with TDOT. Our contractor that's going to do the project has been talking with TDOT traffic. To put that traffic light in is a huge undertaking. So you have to do a traffic study on Chota Road, both ends. You'll do a traffic study for Awahili, Tokwa Road, Ritchie Road, and 444 to see the impact of the traffic in all those areas. So to do that, that would push the project way into next spring. And, it would be a huge price difference because we would have to set temporary poles at the Chota Road 444 intersection to where they can string temporary traffic lights if we got a permit from TDOT, if they permitted it all. Don't think the permit would be a big deal, but it's getting all the studies done, getting lights put in and stuff with an added cost. But reviewing this project with traffic people, the main concern a lot of people has is the volume of traffic at the north end of Chota Road when they think about the traffic at 444 Tokwa Chota. Well, everybody keeps saying that amount of traffic is going to be at the north end of Chota Road. Well, that's not accurate because the traffic at Tokwa won't be entering in at Chota. Plus, you'll have people that will use Ritchie Road, some can use Awahili Utsima route, and some will use Chota Road. So the traffic that should be coming out at the traffic light should be going out in 3 different locations. So we have a message board on one end and one right there by Chota Road. We're going to, tomorrow I'm meeting with them. We should have one up by Ritchie Road before the project starts, letting people know that South Chota Road is closed. And then we'll have a bunch of detour signs on Chota Road, letting people know that there's alternate routes through by Irene Lane out to Ritchie Road, plus Awahili and stuff. So I feel like when we get all the signage in place before the project starts, we truly feel like it will be safe and people will have many different routes to go.
So before I go any further, do we have any questions regarding that Chota Road work? I know there were several before we got to the meeting today, and we've tried to make sure we address all of the concerns.
Clayton, I got a few.
Okay?
Is there any incentive for the contractor to complete the project early, or any penalties if it goes longer than expected?
Yes, there is. It is in the contract.
Okay? Is there any way they could do it in off hours versus daylight hours? My guess is probably not.
No, and I had a lot of people ask me, why don't we do just one lane to where we can leave traffic open? Well, if we did, that would push it to 8 to 12 weeks, and we wouldn't get as good a job, because when you go in and you put this concrete back together, you don't want this seam in the middle of the road. You want everything to join. So at this price, we want to have the best quality job that we can possibly get.
Okay, and then my last question is, had you thought about this 8 months ago, would you have done this traffic studies to be prepared to possibly put up lights on 444?
Me personally, no. No, I would not have, because when you look at the added cost of this project and all the areas that we have that people can exit Chota, I really don't see the need.
So I just want to make, I guess, one comment that I've been getting from a lot is more from a safety concern. Turning left out of the north side of Chota Road onto 444, a lot of people think that's, and I can't disagree, very concerned about the safety of that, because you're coming up, oncoming traffic's coming up from over the hill, right? And so visibility isn't the best. So I just want to be sure, and I think a lot of people that are calling me are saying, hey, let's just be sure we've got safety in mind here as we go through this process.
Yeah. This company that is doing this project does every T-dot on-ramp, off-ramp, intersections in this area. So they know what they're doing. And there's many, many people exit that intersection every day already. So.
I'd like to commend Clayton for his effort. We have gone through rebuilding that road 3 times. We paid for it once. Baptist Church paid for it twice. We found out that you need to put concrete down. Steve, when you asked the question about accelerating it, one of the biggest problems are you might have a road that is complete, but it's going to sit there. And people are going to say, why can't we start driving on it? Because concrete has to set up. And the longer time period it takes to set up to get the strength that you need to support the weight of a lot of those trucks, including the fire department trucks, coming down that road. So just don't be careful to put out we can get done early if they work nights and days and whatever. It's the time that the concrete takes to set up that's one of the most critical elements.
Quick question, the traffic light that currently exists, will that still be operating for traffic control 3 ways anyway? North, south, and then onto Tokel Road?
Yes, sir, it will be.
Okay, thank you.
Not sure, I haven't talked about this until you guys talked about this here. Could our COPS program, I know we've done traffic control for small events and that, would that be an option that possibly could be explored to help with that specific spot you're talking about on the North Chota side?
Yeah, we can certainly talk with them. Yes, sir.
So they can do it on 444?
I don't know. That would be something that they would have to check into, and I'm talking with T-Dot tomorrow also. So.
Isn't that a paid feature of the police department, like for church let out, et cetera? Don't they have to cover that expense? if you request it.
I don't know if they'd do it for that long.
At the risk of ancient history, what do we pay the last time Choda Road was repaired? What was the figure? Roundhouse, ballpark.
I want to say it was around 120,000,
How much?
around 100,000, 120,000.
Well, we've got a thing called inflation, and we've also got a thing called a different methodology that's being used now. All right? And at the last meeting, you came up with a single bidder. All right? Now, I'm told that we might even have magically somehow somebody came through with additional bids. All right? Now, we put up with that for a long time. It's the third time it's been repaired since I've been around. So, as much as I'd love to see it repaired yesterday, are we rushing something? Because we've got a convergence of issues here. You've got the board election, you've got the budget cycle, you've got the Tenassi situation, you've got Choda Road. All of a sudden, this thing called PicklePlex, which I have another name for, and I'll defer at that point, all popping up. $425,000 for the PicklePlex, $460,000 for your project. It's a storm. We've got wants or wishes, we've got needs, and we've got what we can afford. And if we had to wait till next spring to have to let Chet get his arms around the organization, we have new leadership as well. I could have added that to the list. Might we not be further ahead to hold off until spring on that when we've got some of these other issues fleshed out? There's been no statement made publicly as to the extent to which insurance is going to step up on Tenassi. We've got all kinds of people saying, boy, I'd like the Taj Mahal to replace it. But again, it's what we can actually afford that makes a difference. And if we had to wait a little bit longer to correct that mess that sits in front of the so-called Welcome Center, would we not be more well-advised to take that under serious consideration?
Yeah, you got a good point, but also you got the point that if you wait, I'm leaving the house this morning and they're talking about a possible recession coming up. Inflation is going through the roof. Every time you turn around, it's going up. A project that we put in for boat slips, last year was 180-something thousand. We're probably going to entertain that in a capital project. It's up to over 200 and something thousand now, just as a, kind of give me an idea how much they cost. This is in just 8 months.
Again, it's in terms of what we can't afford.
Absolutely.
It makes
And
no
also,
sense to mortgage ourselves to the hilt and then max out the credit cards on top of
we're
it.
not mortgaged to the hilt. Tell me what we're mortgaged to the hilt for.
By throwing all of these projects
No,
out at
you
the
said
same
we're
time.
mortgaged to the hilt. Tell me-
PicklePlex has no business using POA money. When the pickleball club said, we're going to fund it on top of Timeless Teleco, for us to have jumped in, or the POA to have jumped in and said, oh, by the way, here's $4.25, have at it.
Plex complex And that was in the plan and in the budget. We then ran those numbers again, and because of this massive influx of people, those figures changed, and we jacked it up to 2022. Pickleball wanted it earlier. We denied it 2 years before, saying, we still can't prove that you need it now. It's just a want. And they said, what we're going to do is we're going to go out and raise the money and do it ourselves. This board then got to this year and said, that number has moved up. You have raised over 200,000.
220.
How much?
220.
220,000 of the money that we would have paid for anyway.
It's less my concern
But I
that
answered
those
your
projects
question.
are happening. It's the pace at which they're happening and the stress that it puts on our overall budget.
Understood, and you need to be sitting here understanding that this hand is going to have to write a check or vote for that same concern I have, because I'm a 15-year property owner as well, and ran for this position for these same issues that you're bringing up. So we can sit at that microphone and we can say, oh, I don't wanna, but you have a safety issue coming down Chota Road to Tellico Parkway. And you cannot deny that those bumps are getting bigger, and when there's an accident and or turn lanes or whatever, that needs to be repaired.
They were just as bad, if not worse, 3 years ago when we were supposed to have milled that road. I drove by it, I brought it to the attention of PSAC, and by the time PSAC looked at it the next morning, boom, the evidence was gone because it had been paved over. It was a crap milling job.
And it won't
was,
be this time.
oh, yeah, for 400 and what? It shouldn't be.
$461,000, but what do you want me to do? So I should make a motion, we just cancel the thing?
Table it? Perhaps table it?
I'm not gonna do that.
I'm not going to do it either.
It is
We
a
have a
safety
plan.
concern.
There's
It
a
is
thing
an
called
issue.
fiscal sanity. It takes 4 votes. We got 4 people to stand up.
We've already
don't know.
voted. We've already voted on it, Rick. The bottom line is, as with all these things, they're discussed ad nauseum before decisions are made. And if we always go back and second guess our decisions, we will never get anything accomplished.
Clayton, can you
Sorry.
fill the property owners in on all the bids you got? Because there was a statement made, you had one and magically you now have competitors.
Yes, sir. Working with PSAC, which it was not just a spur of the moment thing. This is something we've been looking at for a year, probably. I know it went back into last year. And, you know, because we get numerous and numerous complaints about this, so we decided, you know what, we're going to talk to different people. We're going to talk to engineers. We're going to see what would be the best solution to this project. And we got some estimates on paving it. Well, we knew paving was not the route because it didn't hold up and no one could guarantee the project. So we decided, this is what we feel, we need to go with concrete. So we sent out a request for quote to 4 different people. When we come to the committee, we had only received one, and we wanted to get it, go ahead and moving forward. But before the project has ever started, before we ever signed a contract, before we ever moved forward, we had the other 2 bids came in. They're at my desk. I have them online. I've shared them with Marty. I sent the contractors' name and the bids for all 3 of the bids that we received. So we, as POA, was not going to move forward, even though we had got approval from the board. We felt more comfortable making sure we got those bids. So we continued to work until we got those bids in. So.
Ready? I'll
And
keep
tho-
going.
and by the way, those bids were substantially more than 461.
They were all higher. That's
They were
correct.
all higher by a lot.
Okay, Mitzi, you have
Okay,
more?
I'll keep going, I'll be quick. Golf, Tenacity Operations continues to overcome current circumstances, and the golf course is in excellent condition. Fall dry jet aeration was a tremendous success, and the greens recovered quickly with little to no impact to play. The putting surfaces on all 3 courses are perfect. I would have to say the weather's too cold for me, so all of you diehard golfers, good job going out there and playing on a day like today. Completion of the Kahiti Bunker renovation project, which occurred over the past 2 seasons. This project has exceeded expectations, and by doing the work primarily in-house, the team saved around $750,000. And I think we've bragged and bragged and bragged on that project. Kudos again to Jordan Clark and his team. They've done a wonderful job. Karen's provided some photos here for us today. The Folds of Honor expedition was at Tokwa on Tuesday, September 20th, and the gang raised over $6,500, so good job on that. Moving into Wellness Center, well, here's just some more photos. If you want to go through those golf photos, Karen, okay, then here we are on Wellness. Our new Wellness Manager has started work. His name is Joe Henrich. For those of you that don't know, Jaden Macon, who was Simon's number 2 right-hand man at the Wellness Center, took another position out of the state. So we had a number of applications that were narrowed down. The interview committee was Rec Chair Nancy D'Amato and a villager, Bill Butera. Joe actually comes to the Wellness Department from our ACC department with a strong background in management. He's a former police officer and he is ex-military. And Simon and team say he's doing great and he fits in up there just perfect. The PicklePlex ribbon cutting celebration has been moved to November the 2nd from 4 to 7, so make sure you have that on your calendar. The walking path completion may not be completed by that time, but the courts will be ready. Clear Spanish finished with the roof portion of the complex. Our Public Works area is actually working on the front and the side areas of the complex. The indoor cycling, that's what you see here on the right-hand side. Indoor cycling classes at Chota are a huge hit. The classes are filling up. Simon says they're now beginning the second phase of the classes. The first phase was to cover the fundamentals. During this phase, they assess what users are interested in going forward. For instance, do you want shorter classes? Do you want longer classes? More intense classes? And then timing of the classes. Simon said that this typically is a slow time for indoor cycling, and so with all this heavy interest, they feel like right now the winter season is going to be very busy for the indoor cycling classes. At Kahidi, pickleball usage continues to climb. They have updated high-intensity classes. They are now being offered in the mornings at Kahidi. This came about because interested villagers attended the Recreation Advisory Committee and they requested that we bring those to Kahidi. They're on Tuesdays and they're very popular. Starting in November, they will be on both Tuesday and Thursday. Just a quick update on Tugaloo Beach. The complaints and negative experiences have decreased substantially over the last year. We think having the staff present at the beach area and offering the outdoor recreation reservations and classes is what's making an impact. With summer season ending, they have now moved to offering the classes to 2 days a week, and that's going to be Thursday and Saturday at 12 noon. The final piece is with respect to Wellness Center. Hike the Village has started back up, and these are staff-led hikes each Friday starting at the Trail Kiosk at 10:30 at the Wellness Center. So that really concludes the CEO report. One additional piece of information I was asked to give out this morning is an update on where we are with respect to the Tenasseee Fire and the insurance. So to date, we have received $292,000. $292,082.40. And so what we discussed this morning is the reasons for these payments vary. It could be because of the work that we have done to get Tenasseee where it is today as far as cleaning it up with the temporary fence to keep people out, working on utilities, getting our IT department over there and actually putting in the IT equipment for our temporary snack shack. The estimates on the partial payment for the fire and loss was $2.2 million. And so I bring this to your attention today, something that we've discussed throughout email throughout the week, is our board needs to actually make a motion in a second and approve that these funds be put into our reserves. We talked about it in the executive session, but we wanted to bring it to the attention of the audience today. This is partial payment. We actually still have a structural engineer coming out that we've employed. He'll be here next week. We will go back and forth with the insurance company. As all of you know, this isn't something that happens overnight. We anticipate that we will be going back and forth with our insurance company for the next several weeks. But at this time, this is what we've received. And we, in order to do it properly, we want to make sure it gets put into the reserve fund. So if I can have a motion.
I so move.
Second.
It's been moved and second to move the insurance claim money of $2,292,082.40 to reserve.
I'd make one classification there, to a Tenacity rebuild reserve specifically.
Yes, I agree to that amendment.
Okay?
Okay.
Any discussion? All in favor? 7-0.
And as long as you're on Tenacity, have we got a report back from the investigators on the cause of the fire yet?
We have not. We anticipate that should come at any time as well. Right, right. You know, one
I'm
thing I
sorry
can
for the
update.
table talk, but my guess is that'll be inconclusive.
One thing that I can say, the board is aware, and I can let the audience know, but the investigative team that was out here a couple of weeks ago actually took pieces of the hood and things that were in the kitchen that they've got, you know, as evidence. So they're still trying to decide that. And as a matter of fact, a huge piece of the hood that came out of the kitchen, they've stored in a building at our public works site. So they're still going through all of those bits and pieces. So,
Did you mention what's going to take place Monday?
the structural engineer, yeah,
Yes.
well, I said next week. He's coming Monday, October the 24th. Yep.
Also, can you just give a quick update on where we're at from an operational perspective?
Okay, so from an well, and that's coming up.
Oh, is it?
We're actually gonna ratify, we're gonna ratify the cart storage, so while
Right.
we're on that.
That's
we-
why I thought we'd bring
Yep.
that up when
Okay,
you
good.
give us an update.
So what we've actually done, many of you have seen the surveys that went out. There was an option 3 and an option 4 as to what we're looking at doing. But in the meantime, we have made the decision that the modular home that is over at the Public Works site will be moved over to the Tenacity site. We have ordered a cart storage building. The site is prepped. Clayton, if you want to come up, you know more about the timeline and what permits are needed. But the site is prepped for utilities and also for our systems that are needed for point of sale. Our IT department has got that going.
Yes, we are working with Loudoun County right now, getting us a permit to where we can put that modular building that we have over on site. If you go by there, you'll see site prep is underway. It's pretty close on where the modular building will go. The cart storage building is pretty much finished. We got to get the modular in there before we put up the cart storage building to make sure we can get it in there easily. So the goal is, if nothing happens, which you know how weather and things is, the goal is to move the modular building on site the first week of November, and then the second week of November, we will put the cart storage building in there.
Perfect. And in the meantime, I mentioned this earlier, but it goes right along with this. Our food service operator is bringing options to our Tenacity Restoration team. We have a meeting Friday, our committee, and we'll be looking at food truck options. Obviously, we need food to go with golf, and we need drinks to go with food and golf. So we're working on that for you. So, thank you, Clayton.
So
A question here is, was Tenacity fully insured?
Yes.
Yeah.
You'll give me one moment.
So while she's looking that up, I guess I just want to make a point of clarification. The building that we're talking about for the clubhouse, it's the same building that was used at Tokwa and at Kahiti as the temporary pro shops. So it's great that we can just reuse something that we've already had. The cart storage building is like a carport type building, so it's a roof structure only. That's going to be $35,000, or it is $35,000. The board has voted via email to approve that expenditure, but we need to ratify that vote at this meeting. So just FYI, that's coming up.
That's coming up, and I've got the exact amount that we'll need to get your vote on. But to answer this question real quick so we can get off the insurance and move forward, this is a broad overview of the coverages. The building was insured for $2.6 million. The contents were insured for $308,000. We have a total blanket limit on all buildings and contents coverage for $34 million. We also had the business income coverage. Several people had asked about the business interruption. And we had a separate policy for our golf carts. They were actually insured separately. And as I mentioned, we've just gone back and forth, with the insurance company. And as we reconcile things, or we may disagree, and we give it to them, they have been more than willing to work with us, and they have made it right, in our opinion, so far up to this point. So we will continue to monitor each of those checks as they come in to make sure that they actually agree with what we have said, that the value of that building is. I've actually shared with them what Brad Spiegel just talked about, the reserve study. I actually shared with them, and we've worked based off of that reserve study a little bit of, the amounts of what the inside content should have been worth, so.
And Mitzi, to piggyback on what Brad had on the reserve study, the proceeds give us the cash to build exactly what you had before. Any intention to make it bigger, better, more parking needs additional funding from property owners, whether you pay for it through assessments or whether you pay through it through payments to a debt. Anything bigger than what you had will be more expensive, must be paid for by property owners.
Yep, thank you, Steve. So with that, in order to ratify the cart storage building, the purchase, we purchased this from Max Steel. And as Marty said, it's kind of a canopy type building. If you've been to, we have photos, here we go, Wind River, then you've seen these before. And these are just some examples of what it'll look like. I think there's a second page. Is there, Karen, or was that it? Yep, there you go. This is from Max Steel. The total amount that we need, have ratified is $33,873.92.
Can I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to ratify the electronic vote of the board.
Second.
It's been moved and second to ratify the electronic vote of the board to approve this canopy structure for cart storage. Any discussion?
Mitzi, did the insurance already cover this?
They did. I've actually already got this money back.
So we've already got the cash for this building
Yep.
that will be in reserves. So
Yes.
when we get the bill, we pay for it out of reserves.
Yep.
All in favor? Pass 7-0. Anything else, Mitzi?
That's it on that topic.
Okay. Let's move on to the next agenda item. Oh, we have a question.
Your microphone's off. You have to turn the microphone on, it's not on.
Just get closer to it.
It's on the top.
You got to get closer to it.
Thank you.
I don't know if it's on yet
It's
or
on now.
not.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's a general question, Mitzi, and I don't know if you're the right person to ask. I know that up where I live, they marked up all the road for AT&T to, I guess, install their fiber optics. And I understood that in the past, the delay was that they didn't have an agreement with us to go ahead and do that. But it still sits there, I guess, and no work has been done. Is that ever going to be ratified by us so that we at least get some money like we get from the old charter
I can answer it.
back for installing their lines on our property?
We just discussed that
Yeah,
this
Kat,
morning. I'm
we-
going to defer to Rick on this.
Yeah, we had discussion of this morning. We're in the process of negotiating an agreement with AT&T to give them access, but we would also get income out of it. So that's not final yet. I expect that it'll be finalized before the end of the year.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is to ratify the electronic vote that we took on approving the creative hardscape sign for pickleball. So can I have a motion to ratify that?
So moved. I'll second.
It's been moved and second to ratify this sign. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. No, that's coming up. That's a different one. So let's take a vote on approving this sign. All in favor? 7-0 passed. So we've got one more, and that was last month during this meeting, we approved the Wall of Fame sign in front of the PicklePlex, but we were informed that it did not contain a time frame that would be there. So I'd like to have a modification on that motion, or that approval, actually, to insert a time frame. So can,
Yeah, I move to amend the prior motion by adding a 15-year time frame.
Second.
okay, it's been moved and second that the approval of the Wall of Fame sign in front of the PicklePlex will be for 15 years. Any other discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. Pass 7-0. Next item on the agenda is slip renewals. Pat?
This will be the shortest presentation I've given in 5 years. The Marine Advisory.
That's still pretty long.
I just can't win. So the Marine Advisory Committee has gone through the process of slip renewals and the slip renewals and the what am I wanting to say? Yeah, the lease agreement. Yeah, for some reason I couldn't get slip renewals and lease agreements together. But anyway, the lease agreements, and one of the issues that they were faced with this year, which has risen to an all-time high, we had 40 property owners did not renew their slip lease agreements by April the 1st. Actually, by the end of April. It was actually 42. So they have asked me to start in the month of October to remind all property owners to renew your slip lease agreement by January the 15th. When the budget process is over, and if there's any changes to any of those amounts, that will be announced. You have from January 1st to January 15th to renew that slip lease. Now, part of the reason that we were given last year is we went to Florida, or we go to Arizona, or we took a trip or whatever, or I'm not using my boat. And the issue is, though, that if you don't renew that slip lease agreement, automatically by paying, your lease agreement is null and void, and you can actually be evicted by that lease agreement, and one of those 200 people on that wait list can take over your slip. We do not want to do that. We want you to renew by January 15th. Okay? I'll remind you again next month.
All right, thanks, Pat.
She says that now that Indock and Tanasi has been moved, all the no-wake buoys have been removed. When the replacement no-wake buoys are installed, how many will be installed?
Well, the no-wake buoys were not placed in the correct position. They should be 100 yards, 100 yards due east of the end of Indock. That should put them towards the silos. That should also be moved 100 yards from the edge of all property docks on the south side of Tanasi Basin. This buoy will be 100 yards towards the silos and 100 yards from the property owners. And then the idea is to put additional no-wake buoys along that line across to the Tomatley shoreline in that general area to notify all boaters. Because what's happening is we do have boaters that are very cognizant of the fact that the rule is there's an invisible line around personal docks that extends out 300 feet or 100 yards. All boaters are to stay away from that line, or if you approach that line, it should be no wake. Anyone approaching our docks, for some reason, the people that moved it put the no wake buoy in the wrong place, which subjects our asset to extra strong wake. We want to move that out towards the silo, and I do believe Clayton is getting that arranged for us.
Yes, sir.
So does that answer the question?
So who's responsible for placement of the buoys?
Who?
Yes, who?
We do,
We are? Okay.
yeah.
Just
But
point-
we don't have the horsepower or the technology to lift those heavy concrete out of the dense clay mud on the bottom, right? So that was the issue with the dock and moving the buoys. But they do have to be moved again.
Okay. Next on the agenda is Clayton to talk about the sewer projects.
Yes, as most people know, we've been looking at how we're going to improve our sewer infrastructure, and I had got approval from the board to have some studies done, engineering work and design work done, and on some on our main lift station and installing a holding tank down there. And we have received some information back from our engineering firm. I just received that yesterday. At this time, I have sent it to our PSAC committee, letting them review it. There is 2 options. First, when we sent it to our engineering firm, we had them looking at 3 options. One of the options was not viable, so we're looking at either rehabbing the existing tank, wet wells, and sewer lift station, and installing a 750,000 gallon tank there, or building a new lift station and putting a holding tank there. So my PSAC committee, as I said, is reviewing that. We had a couple of questions that we have emailed back to the engineer, asking those questions. So as soon as we get those questions answered and I get a recommendation from the PSAC committee, I will bring that back to y'all with a recommendation.
And may want to tell the property owners what the TDEC bond or grant would be on that project?
That TDEC grant that Mitzi has worked so hard to get for us, that would be $2.1 million if we get all of that. I don't see why we wouldn't get it, but we don't have it yet. So, but that is a huge, huge help toward this project.
And I guess in that vein, I want to put a shout out to Henry Cullen too, because he was very instrumental in getting the county commissioners to approve this $2.1 million for Tellico Village.
Absolutely. Henry made many, many phone calls to Mitzi and myself, and just kept asking what he could do, and he done a lot of phone calls and a lot of talking to people, and I agree with you. I appreciate his help and support. We couldn't have done this without him.
So you have a bonus topic.
Yes. Any other questions before I move on? This one right here will be the one I get all the questions on. So, I get this question all the time, and hopefully this will make people happy. I know Republic trash has been a big, big issue in Tellico Village, and so I was, for months and months, I've been communicating with them weekly, but I've been reaching out to other trash services, waste services that would be willing to bid on trash service here in the village. I have been communicating with 5 different trash services. We sent Republic a letter of termination that we were terminating their service. They said they will continue to pick up till the end of the year. After we sent the letter of termination, then I could officially send out a request for quotes. I've sent a request for quotes out a couple weeks ago or more, and I've received one back right now. I've received some that said they're not capable of doing a community our size, but have been in communication with others that will be getting us a quote in next week. So looking really promising on changing companies and moving forward with getting our trash service straightened out the way the village deserves to have their trash and recycle pickup.
Can you address, some people have asked a question about potentially going to 2 separate services.
Yes, we did talk to some of the contractors about going to 2 different services, 2 different companies. That would raise the price. That was one of the first things they said, if you're more volume, that you can keep your price. So that would increase people's rate. And then we wanted to, the more that Chet and I talked about it, we was like, you know what, we need to get to where we can hold one company responsible. Instead of dealing with 2, and trying to keep track of 2 and make sure they're doing what they're supposed to, we felt like one company would be better for the village. Everyone would know who to contact. We wouldn't be trying to run down 2 different companies if something happened.
Also, can you let everybody know the expected or the probable price for the new versus the old?
Yes, when I've been talking to people, they're talking 22 to 24, 25 a month, and I know y'all are at 14 now. So, if we're at 22, 23, then that is going up some. But it doesn't really matter if it's 14 or 5. If it's not getting picked up, it doesn't matter how cheap it is. But, I think the company that we feel that we will end up getting to go with will be very pleasing to the village. We would be, instead of trucks running around that is junk, leaking oil, breaking down, you know, the company that I think will end up with the lowest price, I think, don't know yet because we haven't got them all in, has said they will put new trucks in here, new containers. Now, the only downside to the whole thing is none of the companies will continue to do 18-gallon totes because everything goes to one-man automated trucks where they got a lift arm and just one man operates the trucks because they just can't find people that wants to ride the back of a truck and pick up recycles. So if you done recycling, you would have a 95-gallon trash container for your trash and then a 95-gallon container for recycling that they would pick up every 2 weeks. So that's the only difference is a lot of people don't have room for one container, they say, but you would have 2 containers to store.
So that would be every other week for recycle, every week for trash?
Yes, sir.
Any comments or questions for Clayton from the board? Anybody else?
Clayton, when do you expect to bring it to the board for final approval?
I hope to email all the information to the board next week.
Cool.
You know, so y'all know what's going on and hopefully we can move on and get things in place. Getting containers is the big thing, so we need to move on as quickly as we can where they can get those ordered.
So we will likely vote on this electronically and then ratify it at the next board meeting so we can get it moving, or keep it moving, because we really have a deadline by the end of the year.
Yes, sir, that would be great.
Yes.
I'd just like to thank Clayton for all the time and he's spent on this. He's spent hours and hours and hours listening to people's complaints, talking to the company. He's really done above and beyond as far as getting this set up. I know it's taken much longer than most people wanted it to take, but I think we've done it the right way at this point in time.
There's one other thing, Clayton. You need to tell people what's going to happen in November, rate-wise.
Yeah, I don't know if everyone has seen, so we sent Republic determination letter, and then the very next day, they sent us a letter, and an email. From my understanding, it went out to the property owners, but the rate in November goes up. Your residential rate will go up by, I think it was 50 cents or something, so, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
it's a contractual clause.
Yes, sir.
They have the right to exercise it.
Yeah, so, but hang on, we're quickly gonna be over with it, so.
All right.
Clayton, just a quick question. Microphone, please. Yeah, I'll come up. When they pull out, they're not gonna want all those containers. So is it possible to transfer, like we all have Santec containers now, we had waste, for the new company, whoever they are, to maybe negotiate to buy those containers from the Republic and move a little quicker on a new contract?
That has been a discussion we've had, and most of the contractors that we've talked to about trash service has concern with a lot of the cans are just old and worn out. Then they'd have to come back, put a sticker over them covering the Republic or Santec, but they just don't really want their containers because they'll be spending a lot of time fixing them and replacing them.
Okay, thank you, Clayton. Let's move on. Next on the agenda is the finance review. Jessica.
All right, so for the month of September, the assessed lots is 6,851. We have sold 147 lots. There's 705 property transfers, and we have 124 suspended accounts. Public Works, new home permits is 240, miscellaneous 347 with 237 tank installations. Our revenue year-to-date is 22.9 versus prior year, up 2.7 versus budget 1 million. Our expenses are at 19.2 million, which is 2 million below budget. Our revenue for all divisions is at 22.9 versus 20 last year, versus 21.9 budget. Expenses year-to-date is 19.2 million versus last year at this time was 15, and versus budget of 21.3 million. General operations, the revenue is 10.8 million versus about 10 million last year. Budget for this year was 10.6. Our expenses are at 3.3 million, which is 548,000 more than last year, but 691,000 below budget for this year. Golf, their revenue is sitting at 3.2 million. Prior year was 3 million and a budget of 2.8. Their expenses are at 4.1 million versus last year at 3.3 versus the budget at 4.2, makes them 110,000 less than budget. Recreation, total revenue is at 808,000 versus last year at 586,000 versus a budget of 674. Their expenses are at 1.4 million versus prior year of 1.3, which makes them $100,000 less than budget at 1.5 million. Public Works revenue is 6.3 million, which is better than prior year at 5.2 million, which is 1 million better, versus the budget of 6.2. So we're right in line with budget through September. Their expenses are at 8.1, which is 1.8 million more than prior year, but 1.2 million less than budget at this point. Public Safety, total expenses year-to-date is 133,000 versus a budget of 132. Food Service, the revenue, I will state that is for Kahiti Grill only, is at 475,000, which is 99,000 better than prior year and 42,000 better than budget. Expenses, which is for all of our food service locations, is at 1 million versus prior year of 800,000, and a budget of 1 million. Dock and RV, revenue is at 1 million, which is 176,000 better than prior year and 161,000 better than budget. Their expenses are 830,000 versus last year at this time of 650,000 versus a budget of 733,000. Commercial, their revenue is at 132 versus a budget of 137,000. Expenses are at 203,000 versus a budget of 268,000. And if you'll skip a few slides, yeah, right there. Our golf rounds, total rounds through September is 82,341. This is a little a little less than last year at this time, which was 85,000, but it is 15,000 better than budget.
Jessica, could you go back to
Sure.
the commercial?
Yep.
So, yeah, well, I guess I was trying to compare
Okay.
actual to budget, and so we were budgeting to lose money on commercial properties anyway, right?
Yes.
131,000.
131, yes. And some of this will be fixed with the interest for our loan. I'll be moving some of those expenses over to admin.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, Jessica, that interest is for the entire CCI loan, correct?
It's the interest that is being booked to the commercial division right now.
So
is
it's
for
not
the-
really the expense of running commercial.
That's
It's
correct.
the loan.
Yes. Rec memberships, the average for the year for household is 1,193. The individual is 646. We do have one capital funding request, which is the Yacht Club oven or range. The budget amount is 0, but we do have budgeted operation expenses for small tools that we're going to use to pay for this project. The requested amount is $19,482. This is a custom piece. The current oven is over 20 years old, and if you'll go to the next slide, we will show you a picture of the current oven.
Honey. We talked about this in the Finance Committee meeting on Friday. If you'll go back, you'll notice the 3 quotes. 2 of them were $1 off, and that's, of course, a rounding deal. But the group that we use, Katam, is local. It is actually a custom-built piece that we have to have that fits back into that space. We're looking at about a 10-week lead time right now, and our guys have actually done a great job for 20 years keeping this repaired and keeping this piece together, and so it is much needed. It's one of those things that they've did maintenance on it year after year, and it's time that we just get them a new piece. And in talking with Andy and what we're looking at for capital for next year and equipment at the various restaurants, this particular piece will pretty much finish the kitchen at the Yacht Club after we did all the renovations last year and had some upgrades put in there. But this particular one, it's a much needed item, as Jessica said. So Finance looked at that Friday, and so we wanted to bring this to you today.
So I do need a motion from the board, as this is an unbudgeted capital item.
Can I have a motion, please?
Yeah, I'll make a motion. I make a motion to, replace the Yacht Club oven from K-Tom Restaurant Supply, paying for it from operating cash.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the purchase of the oven for the Yacht Club. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I have one question. It says you're using the budgeted operating expenses from the food service equipment. Is there anything left in that after this?
There will not be, no.
Okay, so we're using all of it.
We're using all of it.
Okay.
Yes.
With that, I'll call for a vote. All in favor of purchasing the oven? 7-0.
By the way, I won't be having oysters or chicken tonight.
Look like mussels.
Here is a look at our capital approved to date. We have approved, or the board has approved 2.8 million. That's leaving about 1.3 million capital to be requested. And so some of those items will not be completed this year. So I do have a list of those. We do have $70,000 in savings from what we budgeted versus what we have actually spent. You have the Kahiti kitchen renovation. She gave you an update on that, and we're hoping to get that completed next year. And so that's about $151,600. The engineering services for the main lift station, $305,500. We also had in the budget future strategic investment of $175,000 that's not been requested. Water system improvements of $475,000, and our accounting software at $200,000. And that makes up your $1.3 million to be requested.
Thank you, Jessica. I wanted to add on this particular slide, that's something that Chet had asked Mickey and myself to kind of think about. And so, of course, Jessica gave that to you today. Moving forward, we want this report to have specified everything that's left out there to do so that you can see it, and we'll get that in your packets moving forward, you know, what remaining capital is out there. So thank you for giving that description, Jessica.
All right, thank you.
Marty, I got a question for Mitzi. Let's talk about AWE and Tenassi. Was there any, did we receive any payments from AWE for the Tenassi contract? Like any rent payments or payment for?
Only for utilities,
Okay, so
That's what we received.
Do we
at
receive
Tenassi.
any payments now for utilities for the lunch service, since it's basically Tenassi business coming over?
We already received $1,000 per month for Yacht Club here, and that's based upon usage throughout the entire day. So what we'll have to do is reevaluate with now that the utilities are more expensive, and what do we want to do in that situation. So it's certainly something to look at. I'll say this, $1,000 was a little more than what, you know, so he was already paying a little more per month for this building because we took into consideration this activity center and should there be an event up here or anything downstairs. So what we'll do is look at propane usage and things of that nature and see where we can recoup any of that.
Yeah, I might have a little different view that
Yeah.
$1,000 a month is de minimis rent to pay for a restaurant. So
Well,
we'll
that's
hold
just
those
utilities.
discussions elsewhere.
Well, and that's just utilities, that's not rent, so we could talk about rent, but. That's correct, he pays utilities at all locations. Yeah.
All right, so Mickey, welcome.
Make sure your microphone is on, Mickey.
Thank you very much. Into my second week, and thrown right into our budget process, which is very complex and has a lot of information. So I appreciate the patience of the board. We are pulling together the first round of what we received. And so Monday and Tuesday, we had working sessions with the managers and with the board and the members of the advisory committees. With that, we pulled very high-level numbers together that we don't have 100% confidence in. And again, I appreciate your patience as we work on those. Going forward from this week, we will improve those numbers. We will reclass all of the capital items so it's excluded, so that you see just what a true operational budget will be, and you'll be allowed to approve those numbers. With that, we will then move to prepare the capital surplus schedules, and you'll be able to see, based on the budget, how much will be available to put into the reserve funds, and then we'll start with the capital explanations about what's available and give you the chance to have some input on those. There was some additional reporting that several of you had asked for, and we'll make sure that we comply with that. There'll be the assumption summary on how we built the budget, what were the increases, what additional expenditures, what new revenue streams were being added to the calculations. We'll provide you that revenue schedule for all the assessments and all of the fees, and we'll give you the trends from 2020 up through the current 2023 budget, so you can see where we've been and what the amounts that we're requesting on the assessments based upon our assumptions. And then we'll provide you the information based on head counts, what the consolidated debt of the POA is, and as I mentioned before, that capital reserve that'll show all of the funding, all of the expenditures, and allow for discussions and approve or disapprove on any of those amounts. We hope to have this completed by end of week, and we'll be able to send out a first draft for the board members to review ahead of the next scheduled meeting, which I think is Wednesday of next week. Is that right? Correct.
And that's kind of a quick summary of where we've been and what we've at. Open for questions. Any comments?
So you having
I
fun
may not
yet?
have answers for you yet, but.
So are you having fun yet?
Sure.
So I guess I just want to be clear that the meetings scheduled for the 26th and also for November 1st are still closed workshops.
Correct.
And then the first review that'll be public will be November 4th.
That will be November 4th here in this room at 9 a.m.
Correct.
So everybody can put that on your calendar so you can attend.
And we will have good numbers for you by then.
Yes. All right. Thanks, Mickey.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, I better ask. Are there any questions for Mickey? Can't let you off that easy.
That's all right.
I'm presuming this is on. I generally speak extemporaneously, but today I'm going to speak from the written notes, because I don't want to leave anything out.
Can't hear
This
you.
isn't that long.
Is it on?
You gotta be real close to it.
Boy,
There you
There
go.
you go.
make love to it. I lived in this Tellico village for 21 years. During those 21 years, I've been involved in budget discussions either directly or indirectly. Directly as a member of the Finance Committee for 7 years and 9 years on the POA Board. Never have I observed an entire budget process being conducted in secrecy. Maybe 1 or 2 meetings to discuss personnel matters, such as reductions, but never an entire process. During the budgeting process, a number of items are discussed which impact the coming year. Examples of those are future golf fees, cost of boat slip rentals, recreation fees, and other sources of revenue. Other individual expenditures, such as capital budget, are debated and moved forward for approval. A forecast is given for the entire current year as to net income and cash on hand at the end of the year. These have been headed towards a positive net income that we just heard right now of $3.7 million for the year. And we have over $14 million at the last I knew in the bank. All of this impacts the budget for 2023, and we, the residents, have heard nothing of all of this due to the secrecy. I have heard a rumor that the board is proposing a 9.1% increase in the assessment per month. This would be 4.1% over the current 5% maximum cap, including the CNRs, and 0.5% greater than the current rate of inflation. Once you break through that 5% level, it'll become easier and easier to do it again. We could be becoming more like states we have left, like Illinois, Connecticut, or California, where they just raise tax revenues and never reduce spending. If this is approved, it would negatively impact the more seniors in the village who have lived for years on a fixed income. I would like to ask the board members here, are any of you advocating for or supporting this increase? If not, would you agree to holding to a maximum of 5% as mentioned before? And which is it? Because remember, a non-answer is an answer. We, the residents, need an answer as we will vote next month for either retaining or having new members on the board. Rumors are best cured through transparency. Thank you for your attention.
Let me answer the 9.1.
No, me first.
Come on.
You're a candidate, you'll get to
Yeah,
do
just
the
go ahead and fight over it,
political
guys.
thing. Okay. So first of all, I take exception to the word secrecy. I take strong exception to that word secrecy because we have struggled all of this year, everybody on this committee and other people in the organization, to go out and recruit a new CEO. We have spent untold hours interviewing, vetting all of this information, and all the time, Cap, with all your wisdom, continuously telling us that we're making a serious mistake by not hiring him before him or with him, the new CEO. We felt that it was critical that the CEO hire his number 2 man along with the COO, 2 and 2.5, and have their team made by them. We just went through a couple of days of meetings where I sat here and I thought to myself, I just got transferred to Washington DC on United Parcel Service, and I'm presenting a budget, and I don't know what the heck I'm talking about, and I'm trying my best to gleef through my last 20 years of BS to get through to my brand-new boss. He's only been here a week, and a brand-new board that has been here for years is going to sit here and critique him for not knowing what he's going to present. We don't want to present him to all property owners as not knowing what he's talking about. That workshop is an area that is for training for the CEO to say, that's real good, folks, but I've taken this apart and I don't like the way it's done. Here's my opportunity to explain to you and train you, my managers, what I want to do. Here, I want to explain to you how I want you to manage this process. Now, if you are thinking that we're going through this training indoctrination process in secret, that's up to you to do. Part 2, am I for a 9.1 or a 5.0? I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to get me to say I am going to not look at the revenue and compare to the expenses before I put a calculator to it to generate a percentage. I can't answer that number, and if you think that's secret, you go back to the time you were on the board and you tell me why you voted for a 5% increase or 3 or 2 or 1, and you did not do that calculation, because you did that calculation every time. I watched you do it. I did it. Nobody in this room is going to be allowed to vote on that percent increase, decrease, or whatever without doing that final calculation of this is what the revenues are, this is what the expenses. Calculate, divide by, equals, and that's the number. I'm sorry if it's 5. I celebrate if it's nothing. But it's somewhere in between. Okay, I'm through venting.
Okay.
Did I answer your question?
First
Wait
of
a
all,
second.
Cap, let me correct you. Go to Article 10, Section 3. POA assessment increases. It's the maximum of 5% or the change in the CPI. So don't infer to property owners that we're just raising it to 9.1. That is the cap allowable by the declaration. And until I see the budgets, until I see the capital requests, until I see what happens to those reserve funds, to see what we might be doing with Tenacity and how we're going to pay for it, I can't commit to any percent increase. So don't infer that we just arbitrarily picked 9.1 as the cap. It's per the declaration, and you should know that after being on the board for 9 years.
And I've got one more comment as well. As you all know, Steve and I are rerunning, and to have anybody infer that we are doing anything in secrecy, that is ridiculous. And Cap, it really bothers me that somebody like you that was sat in our position would stand there and say something like that in front of a bunch of residents and in front of this board. That's disrespectful, and it's not taking into consideration all of us working diligently to try to do the best thing for this community.
I can keep my arm up, I'm fine.
Hang on, I'm next.
I had my hand up.
Those committees, these advisory committees, they all come together and they contribute to this process. And that comes out in these budget
discussed, that to me implies.
Well, and I'm stepping on Rick here, I know I am. Call it whatever you want, but it was done in the telegram. We reviewed it at the date changes and the reasons in the Finance Advisory Committee meeting. You were there. All those dates were changed. All of them were because of the specific reasons I explained. Now then, when somebody wants to show up in a meeting and say, I'm going to sit here as a resident or a property owner or a person that wasn't scheduled to be here, yes, you're going to be asked to leave. Just like at the first board meeting I arrived that you were sitting right there when I walked in at executive session, was asked to leave, and I'd been elected. Correct? Remember that day? Okay, and I turned around and said, well, my bad, and left. I was not invited to that meeting. Correct? And that's what. Now, everybody in this community, everybody in Tellico Village, because I am a property owner, you are going to get to review this. You're going to get to review it until you're just nauseous of going over it. Believe me, because that's the commitment we've all made, that you made as a director to the property owners. Unfortunately, we're pressed right up to the wall today. Jessica Johnson's working 87 hours a day. This lady right here, I can't believe she's staying awake. He comes in, and have you ever been home? Well, I'm not even going to ask. I'm looking at Chet and the hours that he's putting in, and it's not because it's such a difficult job, as we're up against a deadline on a budget. And I'm sorry you don't understand, but you're going to get to review, and you can make all the accusations of secret and behind the back, and you're going to come up with all this stuff that you want, but I will strongly disagree. I'm not going to accept it in public because it's not true.
And I guess one thing I'd just like to add to that is the process isn't any different this year than other years, except for the fact that we have front-ended it with a workshop. The whole review process, starting November 4th, is going to be the same as it's always been every year. And everybody's going to have that opportunity to review, to comment, and everything before this budget is approved. There's no different.
So I just want to add, something. We got a new CEO on the 12th of September. We got a new CFO on the 11th of October. Normally, these meetings that we're having right now would have happened with the managers in mid-September. So we're basically a month behind schedule, and we're playing catch-up. So yes, would it have been better if we could have had all this stuff in open session? Yeah, maybe, but frankly, I don't believe after sitting through the last 2 days that we're anywhere close to that. Mickey, you kind of agree to that? Yeah, he does, because he suffered through them. And by the way, the managers saw numbers yesterday they hadn't seen yet. So how could they have meaningful input? So basically, this is all about being 1 month behind the way we always have done it. We'll catch up. We'll have public meetings. As far as what the assessment's going to be, I can't address that. I don't know. But frankly, I understand where you're coming from. There are a lot of people in the village that are older and they're on fixed incomes. And yeah, a big assessment increase might hurt them.
Just to follow up one other point.
And by the way, I'll take that into consideration as I make my decision. But I'm one of 7.
We've got a new CEO, Chet. And we've got to let Chet have the ability to assess his organization, to review the budgets, to run his budget process the way he wants to run his budget process, because he's accountable. I'll tell you, the questions I saw from Chet the last 2 days are questions that were never answered in the previous administration in the 5 years I've been here. So, are things different? Yeah. Do I understand people are wondering why they can't come to meetings? Yeah. But we're building an organization with a new CEO that is accountable for this budget. So I'm not going to make excuses for why people weren't coming in. With regard to the assessment, whatever the numbers come out that we need, we have a fiduciary responsibility. And that fiduciary responsibility is not to keep rates below where they need to be. our responsibility to you as property owners to make sure this village can be viable financially long-term. So if that means the number's got to be higher than you want to see it, that's the way it's going to have to be from my perspective, because my fiduciary responsibility is not checked out at that door when I walk in here. That's all I got.
The budget process this year, then, from the time that it'll be public on the 2nd, or where? 4th. The time from then till it absolutely has to be, and I know there's a deadline.
It would be the November board meeting.
Is that the same amount of time for public comment and stuff that we've had in the past, or does that
It's shorter.
cut that down? Okay.
It's shorter.
So I would just, maybe to his point, provide enough time so that, you know, the public and us can maybe make some more comments and stuff on that because of the short time and not being able to get in earlier would be, I think, helpful to the property owners, just so we've got an opportunity to put our 2 cents in before you guys get to a point where we can't change it now.
Let me just come back. What you've said is the process in the past has always started in September. And I realize why that was difficult, because Mickey was not here, and Jessica was up to her eyeballs and working that way, and I certainly appreciate that. But what I would have perhaps saw, that we are going to start on November 4th, November 8th, November 12th, November whatever, to have the kind of review sessions that we've had in the past, where we can debate these various assumptions that I pointed out, and have these committees, Golf, Rec, and that, make their statements known as to what they are supporting. And then, maybe in December, you approve the final number, and you will have now stretched that out a little bit to include all those review sessions that generally we would have had through the first of these months before Mickey was on board. I'm saying, but when the last thing just came out in the telegram, you set 2 firm dates. November 4th, we're going to have 3 hours. And then November 14th, you're going to vote on the final number.
And to tell you how, what's the word I want to use, how fluid this is, the November the 4th date was come up with yesterday, wasn't it? Because we sat here, we were all prepared, everybody in the room was prepared to keep going, and we got to a certain step, and we didn't have the numbers for it. And there's Clayton sitting back there saying, you know, you're going to review my numbers next week, and I'm going on vacation. No, you're not going to review my numbers while I'm on vacation. So we changed it to November the 4th. It is that fluid, Cap. I'm sorry. There's nothing else I can say.
Yeah, part of the problem with not sticking to the 14th, as you well know, is the finance department has to have time to put out all of the coupon books. So if you don't decide this until the middle of December, I'd tell you we're not going to get our assessments done in time for January 1st. It's not going to happen.
We'll take what we need on the 4th in terms of time, and if it's going to take beyond that, then
We'll add more days.
we'll schedule another day. You know, we'll schedule whatever it's going to take to get through it and to give everybody the opportunity to make sure that they've put their 2 cents in. We're not trying to push anything through over anybody or sneak anything through. If anybody thinks that, then they're wildly mistaken. Yes, it's a different time period this year, and it's because of the new CEO, because of the new CFO. But we are still going to make sure that we are thorough in our process.
And transparent.
Right, and I
And
think
transparent,
if
yes.
anything, that is the reason why we're doing this late, is because we want to make sure we are taking the appropriate time to look at these things, check, double check, make sure everybody's of the same mind of what is going to happen, and then come to a budget. We don't want to rush it through just because there's a date on a calendar.
As I've sat here today and listened, I'm satisfied that this board and the processes that you go through and all of the factors that make up a budget for Tellico Village, that there has been a strong effort to make sure that you're doing due diligence all the way through the process. If it can't be done by a certain date, because we have a new CEO, a new CFO, I couldn't care less. I care that what is being done is what needs to be done. That's my first point. My second point is, how many people have we got sitting here listening to this? I don't even think that's 1% of the total number of people that currently live in the village.
It's not even a tenth.
Okay? That, for me, is a problem. This message is not getting out. There are a lot of angry people out there. And I understand why they're angry. Whatever you're doing, they don't know. There have been complaints that I have heard of trying to address issues with the board, with members of the board, and nobody getting back to them. One situation, you got two houses being built essentially at the same time. It's my neighborhood. There was a problem at the end of the driveway. What the problem was is irrelevant. One of them got resolved, the other one didn't get resolved, and one of them got a letter from your predecessor never even addressing the issue. That's the kind of thing that creates a lot of dissension, that creates a lot of failure to trust what you are doing. And if they can't trust you, no matter how hard you work, it's not going to matter. Somehow, that has to change. You've got to figure out not just that you're doing your level best and all the sweat equity that goes into this, but if that message is not getting out there, you've missed a lot. I don't want to see that happen. Yes, I'm running for a seat on the board. I may make it and I may not make it. But I can tell you that one of the things that I say is I represent them, not the association, because there is a disconnect between the two. Maybe that's created by the previous administration. I don't know. I don't much care. I do care that that has to be fixed.
And sir, I would maintain that every single board member that you're looking at came to this board with that exact same intention that you have.
Well,
And we
And
strive
has it to
every
this
day to
day.
meet that.
Has it to this day, and as I just told him, I'm supposed to be the board member that sits here, and I'm courteous, and I take it all in from you guys. I'm an idiot. You're going to throw trash in my front yard. You're going to pick at my house. Hey, I'm not kidding. I get the letters.
I do too.
Look,
You follow? Now, wait a second.
Go ahead.
And then I'm supposed to sit here and be called these names and treated with this, but I'm supposed to have this air of decorum that I don't then respond back in kind. That does not work. What you just said was wrong. I ran for this board because something irked me, and I ran for it, and I got it, and it still irked me, and I did it again, and I'm in my 5th year, and I could count to 10 real quick here. Okay, hold on. It bothers me a great deal to have people stand up and say, you don't communicate, and we just spent all of these hundreds of thousands of dollars on this video. There's 25 people on here, and if I go through and look at advisory committees and take this out, I bet you there's less than 10 in here that are just regular property owners and not on the advisory committee. Of that 25, at least 5 of them are our spouses watching. My wife, when I get home, she's gonna go, boy, you should have shut up a long time ago.
Yeah, that's usually what my wife says to me.
But here's the deal, here's the deal. You guys can say this about us, and it is absolutely not true. The only way that, because this is what's gonna happen, whether it's 2%, 5%, 10%, or 100%, there's going to be people that say, you didn't do, and they have never seen this meeting. They have no interest in coming to it. They have no interest in reading the minutes. You can show them the binder that we're about to produce. They have no clue where it is. Where do I get it? Where is the POA office, they'll ask. The only way to get this done is to go door to door and say, hi, my name is Pat White, and we just approved a budget. Here, let me review this 1,000-page booklet with you. That is the only way to do it. Unless everybody here decides I'm going to take an interest in at least something. And if I'm concerned about golf, I'm going to watch golf. If I'm going to scroll down the video, look at the menu. Say, I'm not going to look at the whole thing. I didn't retire to attend the meeting, but I want to see the budget part. Watch it on this. But you won't see that number 25 right there climb by 100 by the end of the week. They just are not going to look, but they will stand up and get on Nextdoor and Facebook and say, I'm doing stuff in secret. I'm an idiot. I am out of touch. I don't represent the people. And that's just what you just said.
No, Pat,
they're angry at me because I don't what?
No.
Communicate with them.
No, I did not. First of all, I never said you were an idiot.
No,
Far
you
from
didn't.
it.
But I got the documentation in this computer that shows there's a bunch of people that will get on there and they'll say, you are an idiot, or I'm going to roll your yard, or I'm going to pick at your house, or whatever.
Oh, okay.
That's okay. I'm not objecting to that. That's your right to do that. But to sit here and say we're doing it in secret, or we don't communicate, or we don't tell you, I am deeply offended. You've got to have part of the communication back this way, too.
Well, yeah, okay.
Pat, I'm sorry.
Yeah, let me just.
Let Rick speak.
Yeah, let me
just for a
speak for
second.
just a moment. Number one, I want to thank you for speaking to us. Absolutely. And I understand the concerns you're raising. I don't necessarily agree with all of them, but, reasonable people can disagree reasonably. I'm not sure that we're accomplishing anything with this. I think what we're accomplishing is all getting pissed off at each other. And pardon my French. I could have said something much worse, but what the hell? I was in the military, so I can think of a lot of stuff. So I think that there's a certain amount of civility that needs to be exercised by everybody, including members of the board. And it's not our job to get all pissed off at people. I understand you're upset, Pat. Yes, you are. But, our job is to listen. Our job is not necessarily to agree.
I didn't ask you to agree or to disagree. I'm trying to impart to you what I am hearing.
I understand. I hear it too.
Whether it's a question of whether I agree with it or whether I not agree with it, but my own experience in trying to come and get things presented to the POA has been a failure, okay? So when I say that there is a disconnect, this is what I'm being told. This has been, in part, my experience. I want this to change. I don't want there to be a disconnect. I don't want, Pat, to you have to listen to that BS that's directed at you. That's wrong. I don't accept that.
Well, it's directed to the whole community. Think back, the Toka Clubhouse burned down. Oh my, all the golf carts burned. That was one of the first comments. And then the call. Tenacity. Then the calls into the POA were, what are we going to do for the golf carts? They didn't burn down, but the rumor is rampant. The rumor that we've been fighting lately, it just came across here not too long ago. Why are we self-insured, or are we self-insured? Never have been. But the rumor's out there that all of our money for tenacity is going to go, all the reserves are going to go to pay for the tenacity. We're not. But the rumor's there. They don't call. You say, well, they can't call me. I've told you how many times? 301-524-3999.
Yes, you have.
I live at 304 Skiatook Circle. Nobody calls me.
Wait till the grenades land in your
So,
front
so
yard.
let's try to, I understand everybody's concerns and issues here. I think the important thing to realize, and I think most people do, is that members of this board try as hard as we can to be as open and transparent and communicating to people as we can. You're still, no matter how much you communicate, you're gonna have people that say we're not, and they're mad because we're not, and who knows why. But I will tell you that we have all kinds of mechanisms to communicate, and people need to be making sure they're subscribing to them. We've got teleflashes that come out all the time, the telegram. We do a quarterly newsletter. I do a quarterly video through TVN to try to summarize the monthly board meetings for people that don't want to sit through, 3 hours a month, and we get that down to like 30 minutes. We are trying as a board to communicate as best we can, and to hear people say that we don't communicate, it's just people that they don't know about it. You got to put some responsibility on yourselves too, to try to find the ways that are communicating other than next door. My point. And it's not you I'm directing that to. I'm sorry.
That's good, because I'm not even here yet. But I understand where you're coming from. I understand where a lot of the property owners are coming from. Somehow, there has to be a way to bridge that gap.
Okay,
You
we
won't-
appreciate
you-
that. Thanks.
It's obvious to me, unless I'm stupid, and I suppose that's possible. I don't think it's probable, but it's possible. You're working extremely hard. You're working against a deadline that you can't meet. Got a new CEO, a new CFO. This whole thing is being restructured. And hopefully will be a heck of a lot better than what we had before. Okay? My concern is that all the hard work that you're doing ain't getting out there. Okay? It's just not. For whatever reason. And I don't know what the reasons are. But I sure as heck want to find out and do what I can with what I know to be able to correct it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pretty soon it'll be an empty room. Almost forgot what I wanted to say, but you were talking about open budget commentary, open budget meeting, et cetera. By the time that happens, the budget is going to almost be set in concrete. And part of my concern is that department managers, directors, et cetera, need to be held to account not only by our CEO, but by you as a board. And so when it comes to capital projects, when it comes to head count, et cetera, there needs to be some serious challenges out there. We've got bloating in any number of areas. We've got wish lists in any number of areas. And if we're going to take a look at controlling the budget, if we're going to take a look at the highest and best use of every dollar that comes to the POA, we need to take those things into consideration. And I would encourage you to be actively involved so that by the time we see the budget or hear about the budget, that in fact it's been squeezed, it's been brought into a form of reality that isn't going to blow us out of the water. It's going to be expensive this year. I understand that. I accept that. But it can only be done appropriately with your direct involvement. Now, one other thing the gentleman said, getting the message out. We've got this thing, and I won't tell you what I call it, but nonetheless, it's the connection. When it comes to getting the word out, the connection does an absolutely deplorable job. There's no investigative reporting that appears in that thing. It's all fluff. and/or advertising. And secondarily, commandeering the cover of the connection in terms of getting out the vote. We're going to go to this candidate forum tomorrow at the community church, and you're going to have 300, 500 people at that. That's going to represent somewhere between 250 and 300 residents or homes. And we've got 5,000. We need to get the message out to the rest of those people. And that's why I say we need to get the connection involved. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
You can pull it off. You can pull it off. Pull it off of there. There you go.
Okay. I'm Carolyn Page, and I've been in the village for 22 years, and specifically we came here because of the lake, the golf, and the library. And I'm here today representing several concerned village residents. We want to respond to the information received through an email that the POA is considering discontinuing the 28 years of funding support to the Tellico Village Library. In Loudoun County, the 4 libraries, the 4 other public libraries, receive their funding for their operating expenses and their materials from their respective cities or municipalities. Tellico Village is our municipality. And you've been giving us an annual budget of $9,000 every year. The library cannot continue without your support. Tellico Village will lose the services enjoyed by 2,500 villagers who come through our door every month. Also, 4,200 ebooks are downloaded every month. If the PO funding does not continue, the library would close and Tellico Village would lose a valuable community center. Tellico Village residents would lose access to downloading free ebooks from the Tennessee Reads system. Future or prospective Tellico Village residents would lose realtors showing the library as an amenity. Tellico Village residents would lose access to books, newspapers, magazines, DVDs, CDs, telescopes, literacy backpacks, and unique items for memory care. Tellico Village residents would lose the library's regular classes and lectures on a wide variety of topics. They would lose the Tellico Village Learn classes, the use of a computer lab, and access to the collection of Tellico Village historical materials. Tellico Village residents would lose free delivery and pickup of books to homebound residents and to those in assistant and care facilities. They would lose the ability to rent our courtyard for their own personal parties. I have just highlighted a few of the resources, I'll get it right, provided by our library. Tellico Village Public Library is a significant asset to this community. We have requested time on your November board meeting to speak, and if you have any questions or concerns, please let us know, and we can address those at that time. The email for the Tellico Village Library is tvlibrary.org@gmail.com. That's tvlibrary.org@gmail.com. My personal email is tvpage57@gmail.com. tvpage57@gmail.com. We're welcome to hear from you. Thank you for your time.
I have a question.
Okay.
You alluded to an email you received that said that the board had decided to cut off your funding.
No, we did not receive it. It came to one of the Friends of the Library's officers.
Who was it from?
I think it was from Marty.
Marty?
I told him we had discussed it and that we had not committed to anything, but I did not say we weren't going to.
Well, I didn't
Let-
actually
let
say
me-
that
let me
either. I
explain-
said that you're
Kind-
considering discontinuing.
Let me explain the rules. Number one, we're not allowed to donate to any organization that's outside of the village. We're not allowed to do that. We have been giving the library $9,000 every single year for your quid pro quo, that we get to use your conference room and get to use the area between your two wings without a charge if we,
Definitely,
schedule
yes.
it. So we were buying that service from you for $9,000 a year. What came to the board last month was an increase of $14,000. And in the discussion the board had, we basically said, well, no, we're not going to increase it, but we said nothing about eliminating the 9.
Well, that-
So I would tell you that's not good information.
Well, I certainly hope it isn't. Yeah,
Well,
we certainly hope that's right.
Is anybody on the board,
I don't have
sitting
that-
here going, we're going to eliminate the 9?
The,
I don't think we decided that.
So just for, to be clear, the letter that came to me was to say, were we going to commit to the 14 a year? And I said we could not do that.
Okay, well, that would be, well, actually, it's been 28 years that you've been contributing, and the operating expenses and materials have gone up over those years. The other libraries, municipalities, and cities have been contributing more.
But they don't have a prohibition against donations. We do. It's in
Okay.
our organizational documents.
And the other thing that
understand
I did.
But
and-
don't you support other things that are not in in Telco Village? Like your Public Works building, is that?
That's ours. We own it.
We own it.
Oh, you own it, but it's not in the village, okay.
It is in the village. That's
It
our
is,
land.
it's in the village and the
So
library
the
isn't.
bottom line is, we cannot donate your money.
Well, we're just asking you not to give up, not to discontinue your donations. That's what we're asking. We could not be a library.
I expect that it's going to be in the budget that we're going to approve in the next month.
Great.
So,
Great. Thank you so much.
and by the way, if it isn't there, then people will have to deal with me.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. So it's my first board meeting, and this has been great. I'm coming back.
Well, I'm glad it's been great for you.
It really has. I mean, I'm sorry more people don't come. I will. Serve cocktails, you get it.
Can you get me a list of that medication you're on?
Oh, it really
I
is.
need it.
So I'm sorry Chet's not here. I'm actually here because I am part of the group that helps take care of one of the entrances in the village, 444 entrances to all the different neighborhoods. I am a co-captain, and we received notification in a letter last month stating that Chet has taken a personal interest in the entrance gardens, which is wonderful, and is interested in taking them under the POA's control, and is supposedly going to be working on getting budget to both redesign and maintain those. Now, this is a big deal for a lot of us, and I was coming here to meet him. I think it's a wonderful concept and idea. I know it's budget time. I know all of us have done landscaping of some sort at our homes, so we all know it's not cheap. And I was curious to know, is there a committee? Is there a process? Is this truly being budgeted and voted on in the near future?
It's the first I've heard of it.
And so it is something that we're interested in. It is all done by volunteer work. The budgets are extremely small, $250 a year for those budgets per entrance. And getting more support would be wonderful. Don't get me wrong. It's not necessarily a bad idea, but it is something we'd like to understand, all of us who support and take care of those. And given how tight the resources are for money, if you can find it for this, great. But it would help all of us to know sooner as opposed to later. But thank you. I think you're doing a great job. Keep going.
Thank you. We will follow up with Chet on that.
Well, I can speak to it a little bit. We did meet with the Garden Club about our desire to see some standards created in the entrance gardens. I've had it on my list since 2019 to maybe redo the signage as you enter. I think it was a recommendation from my team when I graduated from the University of Tennessee in 2004 to update some signage in Tellico Village, so it's been a long time coming. We met with them about how we could work together. That conversation took a lot of different directions about how the POA can help to get them all the same, because some are taken care of a lot better than others. They've grown outside of their original space. I'll just leave it at that. And I will say that the communication that came out to you all was not completely accurate. And Chet has spoken with them about that because it was kind of misleading. But we do hope to budget some money to assist with gardens. That is part of it.
So can you just clarify, do you believe that the POA will be taking over the entrance gardens or not?
I don't know that that will completely take place, and that was something that Chet said we would like to try to budget some money if we can find it to work on the gardens in conjunction with the garden club, and that your input would be invaluable, and we need it. And like for the signage, but this is a tight budget. We don't know if that would happen, and that was kind of our end conversation, is if we can get it in the budget, but it wasn't a for sure we're doing this. That's why I say the communication that came out was a little premature.
Do you know when the decision will be made on the budget?
Well, we're in the
November
budget process
14th?
currently.
So by the 14th, we'll know if it's in or it's out?
Mm-hmm.
That would be great. And I'm happy to talk to you in detail
Yeah,
about
great.
it. Thank you.
Love it. Thank you.
All right. Do we have any others? Oh, I didn't ask the board. All right. Mr. White, you have the floor. Make sure your speaker's on, please.
My battery's dead. Let me get my little form thing here. Come on. There it is. Okay. Last couple of years, I've either chaired or been a part of the Asian Carp Subcommittee. There's a gentleman, and I want to call out his name because he put us onto this. His name is Joe McCall. He's been involved in the Asian Carp as well through the fishing club, et cetera. Been doing a fantastic job. There's other people in the community through Watts Bar, all over the place working on this Asian Carp, and the state program just somewhat died away. It just went away. You couldn't see it going on. And Joe sent Marty an email to say, go look here. And so now what I want to get out to you guys is Beth has already put on our website under what tab? News. Under News, there's a link. I'm asking you, no, I'm begging you, go to this site because we've only got a few days left like the rest of this week because it came out so late. Go to this site, click on this link, read this, because what they're doing is they're asking us to give to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Nashville Division, of all places, took the Asian Carp over. They're wanting to say, where would you like to see the remediation or the barriers put up? And some people are saying we need to put it right here at Fort Loudon Lake to keep them out of our lake. But what we've been doing on this POA board and a lot of these committee members around here is to say, if you're going to give us a choice of 10 to put, we want to put them as far away from here as we possibly can. And then put the 9th one in and the 8th one and the 7th. We want to be the last line of defense. So we would like for you to please click on this link, fire off a letter, and make a general statement in your own words to that effect. Would you please? Very, very important. These Asian carp could ruin what TVA tried to get set up way back in the 50s to turn the economic condition of this place around. Throwing out all the mistrust and everything else, please get the letter, send it off, protect our neighborhoods and our community, okay? Then the next thing was personal. I got nothing to do every morning. I get to a certain point and I get bored. So when they ran out of people to move golf carts or Tenacity burned down, I go down there every morning to move golf carts. It was cold this morning. What I saw, though, what I've learned is in the meantime, being a board member, I get these letters and emails, and they'll say, we need to change the speed limit sign here, we need to change the sign to say pedestrians here, there's a blind curve here, there's a hill there, we need to change this. But what happens is, when you start changing the signs going into Tellico Village, that's one thing. Tellico Parkway, Coyote Drive, one takes care of all. But coming back out, you don't need 8 signs for Marty, 5 signs for me to get back to Tellico Parkway, because you got to stop at all these signs. There comes a point of responsibility with pedestrians and such. You agree? It gets dark, it gets light later, and it gets dark earlier. And I'm asking each one of you to think, had you rather be hit by a car or hit a pedestrian? Well, I say neither. But if it was my choice, I'd rather be hit than hit somebody. And the only way you're going to do that is to slow down, look ahead, and be mindful that we're out walking in the mornings. We can put up all the signs we want, but unless we're mindful, we're going to cross that yellow line, we're going to run that stop sign, we're going to pull out in front of that car like a very small percentage of us do. But we all need to start changing our habits. I am mindfully changing mine every day I leave to go move golf carts and come back home because I see those walkers. I challenge you to do the same.
Thank you, Pat. Anybody else? Can I have a motion to adjourn? Hold on, we have one more.
I could not possibly agree with you more. And I want, don't have a heart attack. And I want to tell you why. 2020, November 23rd, my wife and I were headed to Kahiti to play golf. We had moved in September. When we come to the intersection of 444 and Mialakwa, a driver coming out of the Sloan side, there's a stop sign there, ran the stop sign, trying to get around a truck, and T-boned us. I wound up in the hospital with 5 cracked ribs. We are in the process of a lawsuit. Don't ask me when that's going to get concluded. I don't know. But what you're saying is absolutely true. We have to take individual responsibility, because I don't want what happened to me happen to anybody else, or that young man who he worked for Tenacity, I believe. Okay, was out there. That's a horrible story. Okay, so I'm on your side on this one.
All right, thank you. With that, we adjourn the meeting.